Okay, yeah. I would say, of course, right? The problem is we are only looking at when we're living in a Western country. I agree with the intersectionalist that we have a Eurocentric view on a lot of things. And I would even say that intersectionalism is basically an offspring of Eurocentric thinking because it's coming from the critical theory, which was the Frankfurt School and so on. So even that is Eurocentric based, in my opinion, to some extent, at least. Yes, and when you look at other countries, for example, one good indicator to look how racist, so-called, I hate that word, but a country is you go by looking at
Pause. We got a lot of
states.
snapping. One second. We got like a little snap and crackle from your audio. Let me try
Oh,
changing
fuck.
my region. Maybe that might help. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
it might also be from your mic. So maybe adjust the connection on your mic.
All right, I'm on now. Sorry, I wasn't hearing you before.
Yeah. Oh, no problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always
What?
this connection problems.
Well, give it a try because the last thing you said was okay. So try it again.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the at my connection right now. When it starts, I will stop mute and then reconnect. So yeah, I think a good indicator is how racist the people are. If you look at how a country gives states citizenship, and if you look at the countries that have jus sanguinis laws, which is the right of blood, for example, which is most countries all around the world, then you will have an indicator of how the people think that are coming over to you, right? In America, for example, you don't have that law. You don't have to have a child with an American citizen to be called American. You can be naturalized and so on. You can come in legally,
Okay.
right? So this is an indicator of how racist the people are. And my thing to the black voters is Democrats stand for more immigration, and at least at the moment, the immigration is mainly coming from South American countries and from Latin countries, and that undermines your voting power, right? Because the Mexicans don't, and all these South Americans don't really care about black people, as you all agreed basically on the panel, aside from you, basically. They will work together with you, yes, because whites are the majority, but if they take over, trust me, you will have it worse. You just have to look at Mexico, for example.
This is an interesting
My
argument.
first take.
This is an interesting argument. Before I jump into this, and I think there's probably a lot to be said. I will respond to you later on. I want to make sure other people have a space to jump in. So, Sater, if you want to add anything, that's fine. If not, that's okay. And we have our friend Aiko, who I'm always happy to have. Sater, do you want to say something?
I guess I'm a bit behind on the info. Is there a specific group of people? When we're referring to brown racism, are we talking about like a specific race, I guess?
So we're talking about Latin individuals, right? Latin in that unfortunately all-consuming term we use here in the States.
Okay.
That was the genesis of this. We can break that down further, which is more useful. But yeah, that's where we're starting.
Yeah, in a European perspective, it would be basically Middle Eastern people, which we are calling brown. So
So
just know,
racism towards
even
immigrants.
Mexican.
No,
No
not
racism from immigrants
From immigrants. Okay. Okay.
towards black people.
Two
That
different
was the
arguments
topic.
here. Okay.
so.
Um
Sater, to catch you up, and for anyone else who might not have seen, so we had started this, the closed panel. We talked about an article. It was in the LA Times, and I can put the article in Twitch chat and DC chat, so you guys can peruse that. but it talked about one of the biggest racial bias lawsuits in California history, and that was in this area. It's called the Inland Empire. It's a region in California, and there's a lot of warehouses in this particular area. And they're talking to these warehouse workers where where most of the workers are Latin, but some of them are black. And the black individuals talking about a tremendous amount of racism that they were facing from Latin individuals who are working there, right?
Okay.
Slurs, caricatures, and all that. And so that's what got this conversation started, talking about if there's black and brown solidarity, if that's a thing at all. So that was our previous conversation.
Okay. There's a couple of points here. And one of them is that much like any race of people, there's going to be people who are conservative and who are liberal, and the older people are going to tend to be more conservative and the younger people are going to tend to be more liberal. And I feel like a lot of people they tend to ignore stuff like that. They like to pretend that it doesn't exist because I guess they can't grapple with like the duality of wanting rights for people who are marginalized, even though those people while also those people are marginalizing others themselves. It's a bit more nuanced than what would fit into like the cookie cutter leftist arguments. But where was I going?
Older people.
The other point is you talking about black and brown solidarity, which would be incredible and does exist to a certain extent. However, there is also a lot of infighting amongst marginalized races, probably partially because of conservative views from wherever. From Mexico has like a lot of conservative views, so there's like the conservative background, and also the more like psychological elements of putting other people down, so that you can like feel higher, hurt people, etc., etc. So yeah, sorry, I forgot what I was talking about.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're happy to have you. And just so you know, I put the article both in the Twitch chat and also in the VC chat. It's the one of our channels here. So you can check that out. It's LA Times in California, talking about California's largest race bias cases. Okay. Aiko, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So just before I start on this, I do want to say that at some point I'd like to talk about the student loan stuff that was at the beginning of that. Not right now, but I just wanted to respond to a couple things I heard on that stream. But no, just to respond to what Arisorian said, I think when he's talking about look at Mexico, I think I know what he means because I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. And what I found, and I think this is true in a lot of places where I travel, the racism there is a lot more overt than what we might be used to here in the United States, especially between people who consider themselves white in Mexico versus the mestizos. And like one time, for instance, it's just one for instance, but I've encountered something like this at least a dozen times while I was in Mexico. But one time I was at a soccer tournament. It was the Gold Cup a long time ago when it was in Mexico. And there was someone behind me who was very eager to talk to me and my friends. And we couldn't figure it out at first why he was so like overwhelmingly friendly to us. And it was because we were white. Because we were Americans. And he sort of associated America as being a white country. And he just continually talked about how much he hated. He was actually rooting against Mexico in that match because the team was all mestizos, and he was rooting for Brazil, who at the time was, ironically, Mexico actually beat Brazil in that game, which is a very rare occurrence in the world of soccer. It was rather amazing.
What's mestiza? I don't know what that is.
Mestizo. I'm sorry. A mestizo is somebody who is Mexican, but who has primarily indigenous bloodline, and that's really most Mexicans. But a lot, if you're Mexican and you're white, you can trace your ancestry typically back to being purebred Spaniards. Basically, is what they are. And so, if you consider, of course, until recently, you haven't been able to prove that, like with DNA evidence or anything like that. So it really had to do more with your family history, the stories that came down to your family, and of course the complexion of you and your family. And if you were white enough, you could convince people that you're pure blood Spaniard, even though there was a lot of mixing in Mexico, and it's a little dubious just how purely a white people are. But just like in America, and a lot of it has to do just with your appearance and the appearance of your family members. And so, yeah, absolutely, that sort of racism exists there. And when and I hear it from, like, I worked in a school district that was 70% Hispanic, so I was able to talk to a lot of them about the history and where they came from, and they overwhelmingly say that it's a big culture mix, because things that were said overtly back in Mexico couldn't really be said. Even here in Texas, which is not exactly a bastion of progressive values, it was still considered, they tell me, a pretty big sort of culture mix. That isn't to say that. The second thing Arisorian said that I'd like to respond to is that the number one, it's no longer true that Central America and South America are the number one source of immigrants into this country. It's now Asians. They're the number one source of, at least it was 2-3 years ago, the last I looked into it.
Legal or legal
it's
migration?
Primarily legal, right? Because it's a lot harder to get here illegally. I mean, you can overstay a visa or something like that, but it's mostly legal immigration, for sure. Yeah, but but if you combine legal and illegal immigration, it's still the Asian immigration is number one for whatever reason. And I lived in Seattle for a while. It's very strongly. In fact, we've had Asian immigration since the 19th century, when they came to work on the railroads, right? And that sort of wave of immigration has sort of increased, and it's sort of risen and fallen over the years, but it's never entirely gone away, and it's still that way now. I mean, if you want it, I know Seattle's known for its coffee, but they also have amazing tea culture, and it's because of the tea rooms that were established by immigrants that came to Seattle. But the same is true of California and Oregon. The entire West Coast has very strong Asian immigration there.
So Asian is also Indian, right?
Yes, but for an entirely different reason. So in fact, I would say Indians are probably the number two in my area after the Mexican numbers would be Indians, and that's because of tech workers coming in. We have a lot of tech companies in the Dallas area, and in fact, I lived in a suburb called Irving. And in Irving, in the South, it was predominantly, like I said, it was 70% Hispanic. But in the North, it was majority Indian and Pakistani, because we have so many tech companies in that part of town.
I wanted to let in two others who joined us. I'm going to respond to Arrow. I will respond to what you said previously. I want to let in our friend.
I have also a lot to respond, but I let you and the guys joining go first.
Okay, yeah. So we'll do this. We'll give Waterkai and Bam a chance to speak. Then we'll go to you, Arrow, and then after that, I'll respond. Okay. So yeah, Waterkai. And we're talking about the topic in terms of brown racism, and like why it exists and whether it's worse from some places, right? Like worse than the racism we have here in the States. Do you believe that? Do you believe like how it is in those other countries are worse? Do you have any sense of that, either of you?
In different countries. So I've had anecdotes, like I was a bouncer for a bar, and 3 Hispanic people were going at a dude that was from Guatemala. And I asked them if they could take it outside. They said, "This is racial shit, Holmes." And I said, "I understand it's racial. You can take it outside." And they decided to hit me. And the same, I've had issues with Hispanic people in California where they literally put knives to my ears and left keloid scars on the backs of my ears. So I understand where the disparities come from. I've had Hispanic friends that claim that they're Aztec, Incan. They claim that they're Chicanos, if they happen to be half white. For the most part, is where I've heard Chicano more often. But there's such a big differentiation between each of these different groups that you really can't say that there's a coalition in place. But there tends to be a sentiment where it's them first, and then they may help Black people afterwards, especially if it coincides. But there is no real need until anything goes down for them to really get behind us.
Okay.
I think
Go ahead.
I think also answering your question. I mean, I personally never been out the country. I just hear from other people's experiences who have visited places. But I think America has some sort of like expectation of the melting pot when you come here. There's a level of like oh, you can't, there's certain behaviors you can't have. There's certain beliefs that are like considered wrong that it seems in other countries are like super more normalized. Like, oh yeah, no, like you don't want to have dark skin. Like colorism is an issue everywhere, but it's like it's more what's the word? Like I don't know. Can't think of the word off the top of my head, but it's like more out in the open, more direct in other countries. Like, oh no,
Or overt.
overt, yeah, it's way more.
Blatant.
Yeah, it's more blatant and overt in other countries. Whereas like, oh no, that's a dark skinned person. They're poor. Their children would be bad for you. They're probably criminals. Like people feel these things in our country, in America, but you can't express them, like I said, as overtly. Like you have to you kind of just feel these things, but in other countries it's like really like no, that's like they would say to you, I guess as close to your face as possible. They would explain to children like, "Oh no, don't be with people like that." And try, if you are like that, you have a deep incentive like internally to try to, like I said, find someone lighter for your kids going to skin bleaching, like to remove yourself from that.
I feel like a lot of
Is that
people.
good?
Sorry, it's okay. I feel
I'm
like
just
a lot
asking,
of
is it
people.
good?
Is it good?
What he just said, is it good?
No, like morally, no.
I kind of feel like, when Prime asked, is it worse in other countries? My perception has always been that it has when I've kind of come into it, but really that just might be my sensibilities, because really, I think the word overt is a better way of putting it rather than saying it's worse, because I think it's very possible to be just as racist in terms of your behavior and the denial of opportunities and everything else. But if you're covering it up for polite society or because you don't like the repercussions of it or whatever, that's not necessarily a good motivation. And so at the very one, I suppose, just to look at the other side of it for a moment, the overt racism that you'll see in other countries, at least is a little bit more honest. You know what you're getting. Whereas here you might run into people who wish you ill on the basis of your race, and you might never know it based on your interactions until you leave the room and they start talking to each other.
Go ahead. We'll get to that in a second. But go ahead. Arrow, you wanted to respond to lots of stuff, so I want to grab that space.
So much I have to respond to. Oh my God, where to start? First, let's go with the football example, right? I find it interesting that you brought up basically he was racist because he was basically white in a Mexican country. So that is why he was racist. I would say I have a great example for America. America was playing Mexico in America, and you saw all these Mexicans living in America cheering for Mexico. So the exact opposite. I think most of the people in Mexico, first of all, they are not European. They are something like 40% European ancestry and 60% like Aztec and indigenous people, basically.
Right.
30-40% think when I remember correctly these statistics. So they are completely different ethnic group now because of this mixing, and this is also a great example to show that with this myth that if we all mix up or something like this, then racism ends. No, there will be no new ethnic groups being formed, just like the Mexicans or the Turks, for example. They are a completely different group from basically they're coming from the Tatars here, and now they are basically a mix of Arabs, Mongols, and Greeks, right, living in Turkey right now. They have formed a new identity. So this myth that, for example, was also being very popular, made basically in this new kind of book which made headwaves lately, called The Last White Man, for example, right? He was openly calling for basically genetic genocide against white people, this guy, and was praised all over the mainstream media. And he basically said, well, if we get rid of, if everyone becomes brown, he was a Pakistani, so his dream was everyone becomes brown, not black, then all problems are solved. And when we are seeing, for example, the Turkish example, or the Mexican example, we see that new groups are just being formed, and a new identity is being established, basically. So yeah, I don't see it. I think most Mexicans see themselves as Mexican and not as European.
Well, okay, except for that last sentence, I was following you, but I feel like that person that I was talking to that was behind me, he was Mexican. It's just that he was pureblood Spaniard in his background, but he wouldn't like culturally, like he might consider himself Spaniard because that was sort of the airs that he and his family put on. But like, I mean, you know, he spoke with a Mexican accent. He didn't, you know, he didn't have the lisp that you would have like in Barcelona or something like that. He was culturally Mexican, but there absolutely is a difference between Mexicans who consider themselves white and the ones who consider themselves mestizo or brown. So there is that difference. So I agree with you there, and I do think new cultural identities form. Like, for instance, in America, it used to be that you know, if you were white, that basically meant you were either German or of British, some version of British heritage, right? You weren't considered that if you were Italian or Irish. And today, those identities have vanished. I mean, yeah, of course, you know, we can. I can say that I'm Irish. I've got an Irish last name, but really, I'm lumped in with all other white Americans. And so, you know, we've traded in. You know, I've traded in my identity of what would have been an Irish identity a few generations ago, and I'm just white. And the same is true of people of Italian heritage or Spanish heritage or French heritage or whatever. So, new identities have formed in America for sure, and we invented new ways to otherize, you know, one another. And part of that has been through skin color, and some of it's through language. If you're in this country and you speak another language or you have a strange accent, you'll be otherized for that as well. So absolutely, when you mix races, you know, you might trade in one version of racism for another, and new identities will form and will otherize each other based on that for sure.
I feel like America at
Yeah,
least has America at least has like the veneer of social progress, you know? Like we're still pretty fucking racist, but like there's like that kind of layer of social appropriateness over everything. Whereas in other countries they don't really have that. Like if you go to like Japan or Korea, they're like super racist over there. They are very openly like culturally racist. And I feel like part of it is like the homogeny of the society that they're living in already. Like I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned like the melting pot. You have that idea that you come to America and you have the melting pot and you kind of expect that there's going to be people of all walks of life here. And that's not really a thing in a lot of other countries. So there's a lot, I guess, more incentive for that kind of tribalism that is so prevalent everywhere.
I get what you're saying 100%, but the thing is, in a homogenous society, it tends to go by a class system 100%. When it's all
Yes.
Swedes, all Japanese people, all these people, it's going to usually be classist. So when you get to a country like America, it becomes a tier list of which race has the worst characteristics and stereotypes. And
Yes.
those are the people that are going to get shit on.
The
So
intersectionality of bigotry.
as those stereotypes start to wane out, certain people move up the tier list and start being regarded as white. So you have, when you were in the 20s during Ellis Island era, Italians, uh, Scottish people, Irish people, all these different people weren't considered white. But now Armenian people, all these different people, based on what they present as versus what their skin color is, are considered white and get all the benefits that come along with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to
Am I wrong?
okay, sorry. I
No.
just wanted to I had to send a DM, I apologize. And
All
then I had
good.
to talk at the same time. I'm not good at that. First of all, thank you for being here, our friend Doobie. Shout out to my man Doobie. Always happy
Oh
to
no,
have him.
Doobie's here.
Yeah, that means the party starts when Doobie
I'm
shows
gonna
up.
hear the N-word tonight. Not again.
Oh
I'm
boy.
traumatized. I have PTSD.
But yeah, shout out to my man Doobie. I I guess I want to respond to Arrow. Kino Elise, thank you for the 26-month resub. 1 second. Kino Elise, a
All
fantastic
hearts.
individual. We love Kino Elise. She's been, as you can see, a long time supporter. 2+ years here on the channel. One of our original subbers, right? She has one of the founder badges. Shout out to Kino Elise for still sticking with this channel. I adore you too, Kino. Please stay safe. We love you and we want to see more of you. Kino's amazing. She's just a fantastic, kind individual. Like one of the best people I've met here on Twitch. Not a high bar to clear, honestly, but still, she's a genuine, amazing human being. So shout out to Kino Elise. Okay, so back to this. When you said, Arrow, that things will be worse if they take over, right? We're referring to Latin Americans.
Oh my fucking god.
I don't believe that's the case. Sorry, no, it's not even I don't believe the case. I think I just hate the framing altogether. One, if they take over, like, what does that even mean, right? That implies something nefarious in and of itself. Are you mean when Latin individuals outnumber people of European descent? Is that what you mean? Is
Yeah,
that taking
especially
over?
in power positions, right?
Okay, so you think them in power positions, and then who are you including uh, in these power positions, right? Are you talking about Latin individuals who are of European descent, which are then we're trading one for the other? Or are you talking about Afro Latin individuals or indigenous Latin individuals? The problem with using this term Latin, which is what I was saying in the previous panel, is that it is so vague
I
to
agree.
the
I
point
agree
of
with that.
useless.
Yes.
Yeah.
For
So
example, I have a great example for
okay.
that. For example, where this big what I've gathered, it was like 2 years ago, I think, when this big migrant caravan. I think it was still Trump. It must be 3 years ago.
Huh?
I think they came mainly from Venezuela, I think. And
Mm.
the Mexicans were like, no, no, you can't stay here in Mexico. Either you go to America or you go back. So there's absolutely no solidarity between South Americans. Absolutely. I'm just saying any race other than Europeans taking over is worse for black people. It doesn't matter if they are South American, and that is most likely being Mexicans taking over, or being Asians. I think Asians would be even worse, especially Chinese people. Um, Yeah, because most people in power right now have a liberal globalist mindset, and that's normally good for minorities, right? So and all these other races, I don't see them having this kind of mindset. Yeah, they might virtue signal to that, so whites are not identifying them as playing like in an in-group bias kind of way. But I don't believe that they have this liberal mindset. They still have an in-group bias, and
Do you
Pew
think that
Research
there's a
have,
plan? Like, do you think that they're doing this intentional? Like the entire group of Chinese people in the
yeah,
United
it's a
States, for
natural
example,
phenomenon. It's totally
it's a natural phenomenon that they would like
Yeah.
pretend to like be liberal and to like
Yeah.
equality and things like this to like hide under the radar.
Sorry, is this just the
Yeah.
Jewish question redesigned?
No, it's just a normal phenomenon. You see it everywhere. You see it in every
Where else
country.
do we see it?
What do you mean with
Well, give us an
such a
example.
behavior? Well, for example, in Turkey, when it comes to the Kurds, they are very in-group biased. They're fighting with each other for centuries, and they
Wait, hold
even
on.
have this conflict
I think
here
you're
in Germany.
misunderstanding me. So when I asked you for an example of this happening elsewhere, what I was pointing to specifically
Okay.
was you
So
implying
yeah,
that every like Chinese immigrant, for example, is pretending to have a liberal mindset, a pro-equality mindset. But when they actually take over, quote unquote, the group takes over, they're gonna take off the mask and suddenly they're like oppressing all the black people. Like where is that?
Well,
Where's that happening?
yeah. Well, the thing is, it's mostly happening in only in Western countries because we are the only
Well, give me
countries
another
which
one.
have this mindset where you can undermine those people, right? When it comes to and you can even see it now, at least when it comes to white people, and some have also quoted famous Mexican leaders or Latin American leaders that are openly about their racial bias, and they are only for their in-group. They were quoted on this very panel before the after show. So they're very open about it already because they have no fear. They have no fear of white people because white people are so deracinated. They don't give a shit.
You think
I
the
mean,
problem?
Can I
you're
ask if
supposed
you
to
like
provide me.
Nazis? Can I ask if you
It's
like
funny
Nazis?
that
I just
the
want to know.
woman, right?
Just
The
for
woman
fun, I
calling
want to
it.
know if you
It's
like Nazis.
no, I don't like Nazis. I'm not a national socialist.
Okay.
I hate this, uh, e- especially on national. I'm an ethno pluralist, right? So what the national socialists have, like the basic mindset was German superiority, right? And they were classifying even other Europeans, especially the Slavic people,
Yeah, you just want the
basically
ability
lower.
for people to freely
I'm
associate
totally
amongst their own people or amongst their own kind.
Yes, indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. And it's
So
not
you're an
only
ethno-nationalist.
it's yeah, it's what many people also don't forget also about that is it's also preserving regional differences, right?
Oh
So, for
yeah.
example, in Germany, we have a huge culturally different German tribes, right? You have the Saxons, you have the Bavarians. They have slightly different cultures, and I want to preserve that as well as the bigger. We have to form a bigger identity, which is Germany, because otherwise you have other countries which just overrun you if you're divided, right? And I think it's also since the rise of China and India and all those superpowers or coming superpowers, you also have to form like a European identity, for example. And the Africans also have to form a Pan-African identity or African continent to not be fucked over by other world powers, right?
Okay, can I
No
just say,
country
I see.
can maintain China or America or something.
Yeah, but you're
Okay.
rambling on, and what you're supposed to do at the start of this ramblings event was provide me an example of another country where of a racially monolithic group, they're thinking as a hive mind or something, came into a country, hid their true intentions, pretended to go along with the liberal mindset with like pro equality and shit. And then once they became the majority, took off their mask and began oppressing the other races in the country. Where did that happen?
Well, you have a very similar strategy when it comes, for example, for the British Empire going into India, right?
The
Pretending
British didn't
like
do that.
they support the one. Of
They
course.
left.
Yes, it wasn't a colonization, right? But you have this very similar mindset. They pretended to be friends to that one group, right? And then when they have beaten with the help of the one group, the one Indian, because India is also very diverse, they have now turned against the other group and so on, and you see it everywhere.
Do you think the problem might not be with the specific race and their tribalism, but with the position of power and how people will inherently shit on or kick down anybody who they perceive to be below them in order to get higher on the up the rungs? Yeah, ladder. There we go.
So you think it's a classism thing?
Yes. I think it's classes, because I mean people do like pretend to be more leftist than they are in order to get to positions of power, but I think that it's more fueled by the desire for power. So I guess classism would fall under that, and not a desire to
well, that would
I
mean
don't know, kill a race.
opportunism, right? Opportunism then. Yes, that you also have these kinds of people, and these are power-hungry people. Mostly also have psychopathic traits and so on. Of course, they will do whatever is beneficially. But what you implicitly admitted there is that we are an anti-racist country, that we are a left-wing country, and that we are the opposite of what this panel is claiming we are.
What did they claim? I think everybody here has agreed that the
Everyone
U.S. is
claims
less
that this is
racist than other nations around the world because of
still,
the social progress movement.
Yeah, but it's still a structurally racist country.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean, most
According
places
to
are
you.
structurally racist.
So why
Well,
is it
hold on, but most of
beneficially?
the
How can
structural
it be a
racism in the United
racist?
States is like the after effects of institutional racism,
Yes.
right? Jim Crow, etc. Fucking redlining, right? Even like the '90s crime bill, we're still dealing with the racial impact or the specific racial impact of those things, right? But it's not as if I don't think you could say that the United States has like laws on the books, which is what you're implying, that are like favoring certain races over the others.
You don't need
No.
laws in the books that favor. First off,
Yeah,
they
I
do
agree
like
with
just
that. I think
that's what he's
implicitly,
implying.
not
With that.
explicitly.
So can I ask you a
No,
question?
I agree with that.
So, Erisorian, you said you wanted to preserve the culture of like the Saxons, for instance, or other regions. Is it possible for someone whose family goes back in Saxony for 3 or 4 generations, who've picked up all the local customs, but happen to be black? Is it possible? Would you consider that person authentically Saxon and able to like carry on Saxon culture and traditions? Or would they have to share the genetics of Saxon?
Well, he can be like to some extent, yes. When there's a consensus that he's totally culturally what is the word, like assimilated, right?
Yeah.
And then yes, but I would say that this is a very outline, because he basically has to lie to himself, because it's not only the cultural customs, it's also history, right? It is lineage.
Well, listen, the reason I say it is
when yeah.
The reason
So
I say
basically,
this-
he has to lie to himself, right? He has to, just like the transgender have to lie to themselves that they are man or woman, right? When they are the opposite. You can have the same thing when it comes to transracialism or
okay, so
cultural
this
identity.
is okay. Hold on,
You're
let's see
not
if I
really
got this
from that
analogy
stock.
right. So in this analogy, sex is to race as gender is to culture. And if your race doesn't match your culture, then that's a lie.
Can you repeat that?
Gender and
so-
culture are both social constructs. So even in the metaphor that you're putting out, you're still wrong. You're like proving yourself wrong.
No, when I'm standing in front of the Big Ben, right, as an African, can I say, well, this is what my ancestors have built? No, of course not. So in order for him to say basically, these are my ancestors and this is my culture, this is my real identity, this is where I'm coming from, and so on, he has to lie to himself, or he has to deny his real basically genetic line,
Well, people
and has
can't
to
help
say,
where
I
they're
don't
born.
care,
No. But
I
Arizona,
like this culture more, and I want you to accept me as. But I think
okay, but
when
almost
people are honest,
Arizonian,
I can never be
almost no one
Japanese.
listens. But hey,
I
Arizonian,
can be tolerated, maybe.
almost nobody listens to that music now. So are you saying that like the vast majority of Americans now are not Anglo-Saxon, even the white ones, because they don't listen to that type of music? So why would you make an appeal towards a historical thing that people aren't engaging with now, and then implying that that sort of thing has some sort of impact on present day people when the present day people are unfamiliar with and unengaging with those things that you're talking about?
No, I say when it comes to European countries, it's definitely the thing, right?
Do you
When it
think
comes
big
to
band music is the
America,
most
yes.
Wait. You think big band
Big
music
band
is the most
music, I'm
That's what you're
talking
talking
about
about.
the architecture of the Big Ben.
No, Big Ben. You said
Oh, the
Big
Big Ben.
Big
Oh,
Yeah,
I thought he
Big
was talking about the
Ben. Yes,
music.
sorry
Big
for
band. I
my
thought he was
bad
talking about the
English.
genre.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So wait,
Or the
hold on.
Cologne Dog, right?
No, I got you.
can,
But so that's
yeah.
even more so. Like, even if you have literally no idea who made that, that has no impact on your actual everyday life and the decisions that you make nowadays. So how would that be impactful for a person's like actual life?
No, this is what these migrants are telling me. These architectures are not representing myself. They feel foreign. They feel this is when I I can appreciate other, like for example, let's stay with the architectures. I can appreciate a very high appreciation of Japanese like culture, buildings, and so on. Right? Uh, I find them very beautiful, but when I see them, I feel this is not a part of me. And this is something
Yes.
you can't really explain. It's almost like an instinct.
Do you
Sure.
think that
Right?
that's universal
Well, you
or just a
can
thing for
explain it.
you?
No, even if it's there,
It's
does
pretty
that
easy
have
to
an
explain,
impact
bro.
on the decisions that people make on their actual livelihoods? Does it have anything to do with their actual culture? Because when you start talking about culture, culture is typically the things that we look at that help that like the circumstances surrounding a person's upbringing that influence their decision making, right? And if this doesn't have any impact on those things, why would it be relevant?
I tell you, you argue for it yourself, or at least black activists, black sympathists. They say we need more black representation in movies, TV shows, and so on.
Okay. Do you
So
understand why that's so
why
incredibly
do you
different
want
than
that? Because
architecture? Do you not understand why that would be
it's the
incredibly different
same
than architecture?
principle.
No,
It's the
it's
same
not.
principle.
What's the
Yes,
principle behind why we want black representation, since you're saying that these things are the same? What's the
because they
principle?
see themselves in these people.
No, why do they want to see themselves in those people?
As a kind of biospirit.
No, okay, there we go. So you don't understand the principle, and that's why you're saying it. Here, I'll help you. It's okay. So look, the
So
reason why
explain it to
I
me.
got you. I'm going to. So the reason why we typically talk about representation and things like that is specifically because when you a lot of people form their opinions and their ideas based off of the sort of reputation that the representation that they see. Media has an influence on people. For instance, you can look at like historically that you can see that movies like that showed like maybe pro-life stances like have helped galvanize people towards pro-life things. Or you can look at like the foundation of the KKK and how that was like born from a movie called Birth of a Nations, right? There's all sorts of things where, or how the movie Reefer Madness had such a huge impact historically on why United States had been so very staunchly anti-marijuana. We get our opinions very largely from media that we consume. But when you find that the entire media representation of yourself is something that's incredibly foreign or incredibly negative, then you'll say, wait a minute, for children to have like some of the same values that the other children are getting, such as like seeing yourself as a superhero, seeing yourself as a teacher, seeing yourself in all of these other like facets of life that like can be represented in a film, and you're finding yourself to be absent of those things, then you're going to say like, okay, then this has a tendency or has a potential to shape the mindsets of children such that they don't see themselves as being able to assimilate to those kinds of things. Tell me how you get any of that from architecture, where you don't know, unless you're actually in some sort of art class, who made the architecture, when it was developed, where it was developed, or any of those things. Like you just don't know any of that. Like, so that doesn't have the same impact at all. The principles are entirely different.
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay, then
first,
I just broke to you the
yeah,
difference. Tell me
first
the
of all,
similarity then.
fanatic.
Tell me the
Yeah,
similarity.
fanatic. First of all, I think you are disingenuous, right?
Okay.
If a white actor in a movie, right,
Tell me the similarity.
acts the exact same way, acts in the exact same way, right, as black people, do they then stop to say we need more black representation? If a white and a black politician say the exact same thing, for which politician will the black people vote? If they have the same standpoints, talking
So you're
about
not
the
answering
same
my
things,
question. So you
do
said that those things are not
honestly
the
can
same.
say to me, can you honestly say to me
Yeah.
that black people will not vote for the black politician?
So you're not answering my
Yes.
question. This is a totally different deviation from what I was talking about, and we're not going to let him run from that. And you guys in the panel aren't going to either. So the question was, if these things are not the same, if these things are not dissimilar, as I just explained to you the dissimilarities, then tell me what principle would be the same between the two. Because I just explained to you the differences, the reason why representation matters. What is the similarity?
I say
between that and
first,
architecture.
Let me repeat what you said. You said the representation is important because white people don't get it, right?
That's not what I said. No, I'm sorry if you weren't listening. I'll say it really succinctly this time. The representation matters because children tend to imagine and see and have their imagination shaped by the films that they're watching. So by the media that they consume. So if they never see themselves in any of the media, then that means that it's harder for them to see themselves as teachers or doctors or lawyers, where a lot of these movies are inspirational and inspire people's ideas. So representation matters in that children should be able to see themselves so that they can be motivated, as we've seen has been very effective throughout history throughout the history of media. Tell me how that's similar.
So you're agreeing with me, race matters. So they can't see themselves.
Tell me how that's similar to architecture, because what we were talking about originally was architecture and how that matters as far as something, and how that's similar to representation. I'm saying that these things are wildly different, and the principles that I just laid out to you do not apply to architecture. Tell me how that matters. Tell me how they're similar.
Or are they not? I can actually tell you. I can actually.
No, let him do it. Let him do it. Let him do it.
Just really quick, because I think it actually. Really quick.
Oh my God! You're going to save him? I already went through this spiel the first time and he ran from the argument. Let him just do it.
Calm down. I'm not going to save him. Calm down. Because I think you can see it in
architecture. If you save him from this,
I think you can see it in architecture, right? So he said earlier, like, hey, when I see, or what these immigrants are telling me, that when they look at Big Ben or they look at the architecture here, they don't feel spiritually connected to it. And even though he can appreciate Japanese architecture, when he looks at it, he feels like this isn't part of him, right? And he can't really explain it. But you actually can explain it, right? Because if you're in a Western country, you've probably grown up most of your life seeing buildings that are built in a certain way, a certain type of architecture. When you watch movies and shit, you're probably seeing mostly Western style buildings that are going to remind you of the ones that you've seen growing up, right? So when you see Japanese style architecture, it does feel like it's not part of you because it just hasn't been represented to you throughout your life, right? It's not something you're exposed to a lot as a child, right? So in that way, not having that exposure has shaped you, and that you don't feel connected to that thing, just like a black child or a brown child won't feel connected to the superheroes that they're seeing on TV or the idols that they're seeing on TV because they don't have the same skin color. Right, but the answer there isn't to just like say, hey, we just never connect to these things. It's to have representation. I mean, I live in California. You drive down the 71 freeway. You look off to the right side. You can see a beautiful fucking Hindu temple in the middle of fucking Chino Hills. Right. If you go to Hacienda Heights, go up the fucking hill, which is a Spanish named city, by the way. Go up the fucking hill. There's a beautiful Buddhist temple there. Right. So the answer isn't less representation. It's more, so that more people can feel connected to things within your society.
Yeah. So as I said before, like before I joined this, I said specifically I shouldn't even waste my energy because I know I'm not going to get a meaningful one back and forth with this nigga because I know everybody's going to jump in, and there goes the savior right there. Look,
that wasn't a safe.
I love
that
you.
Was
I got
no,
you.
I want to run away. That's fine.
No, I want to go. I don't want to do this with multiple people. I hate it. This is actually really annoying to me. This is stupid. Like the nigga clearly wasn't going to answer my question. I was going to hold him to the fire, and niggas are just going to go out of their way to answer for him so that he didn't have to actually. Yeah, it's not worth the investment. I can't have any meaningful back and forth with this person.
On whether or not they like Nazis, but like to have a homogenous singular society.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. Like it's fine. I can talk to him another time.
All right. Thanks. So,
I love
but okay, I go. You want?
What's up, Ike?
Yeah. So, Arisorian, just one quick correction. You said that black voters are going to vote for the black candidates every time. Just look at the 2020 election. We had 2 black candidates, Booker and Harris, and black voters voted against the 2 black candidates, and they voted for the old white guy. So, and they did it based on the ideas that he was presenting, right? They weren't doing it based on the race of the candidate. So, I think this notion that you're going to have this sort of Trojan horse come into society and change things from within and take over is it's ahistorical. It's not what's ever happened in America. And America's been a country of immigrants since its founding. And if you look at the Hispanic wave of immigrants specifically, which already is no longer the biggest wave of immigrants in this country, but if you were to look at that wave, I see the same pattern every time, which is to say the first generation comes in, they don't even speak the language, they primarily speak Spanish. They have kids, the kids grow up bilingual and they end up translating for their parents in social situations and things like that. And then the third generation doesn't even speak Spanish and they become fully American in a cultural sense, and they've lost touch with the culture that they've come from. Maybe they'll go visit or something like that, but they won't even be able to speak the language. And you also get horrifying stories of people who get deported because they were brought here like at age 2 and they go back to deported at like age 30 to a culture that they don't understand because they've always lived here. Like the assimilation here happens that fast, but at the slowest within 3 generations.
Wait, it's not horrible when they came to America, completely different country, but it's horrible when they go back to their roots. So first of all,
it has to do with consent. It has to do with wanting to be there. Yeah, if they're here, it's because
you changed the premise. What premise did I brought up?
It's consent.
If a black politician and a white politician have the same stance, right? Of course, black people have this concept, and I also have this concept. I would vote. I'm an ethno-nationalist, right? I would vote for a black AfD politician who is basically an ally. Of course, I would vote for him instead of the Green Party. I would do the same thing. But if I had a white person doing the same thing, I would vote for the white politician.
Okay, but there wasn't a lot of ideological difference between Booker and Harris and Biden. They chose Biden because out of pragmatism, really, because that cohort votes very pragmatically. But also, Obama had a tremendous amount of white support when he ran. So, like,
because white people.
Ideology doesn't. Ideology. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that race doesn't replace ideology. That you care about both race and ideology, but in America, it doesn't work in quite that blatant a way. When it comes to voting for politicians, it really does come down to, even if there's minor differences, you're going to vote based on ideology and not race most of the time. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of people out there who will vote based on race, but I don't think that that's the way the black cohort votes in America, and I don't think it's the way a lot of minority cohorts vote in America either.
I feel like you are
even
running from the thing that I was asking you about.
When you say
about
ideology,
about the representation thing, because you actually didn't answer that. You went quiet, and then Aiko started speaking. So if you can, the disconnection that comes with lack of representation is something you can feel yourself when you look at Japanese architecture. Why couldn't you extend that to racial representation in media?
Yeah, I feel it's the same kind of. It's almost like what's the English word for it? It's not self-preservation. It's self-justification. Right? So when I look at something, I have to justify my existence basically, and that is for most people, it's an unconscious instinct. So you have these unconscious bias studies, for example. I'm not against that. I think they have really.
Sure, but what do you think that comes from? Where do you think this unconscious bias comes from?
Genetic.
Genetics?
Like, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure genetics plays a part, but wouldn't you say it's probably like massively cultural upbringing, your surroundings, your environment, etc.?
I know.
I mean, this is why
Uh,
you feel a certain way when you look at European architecture versus Japanese architecture, right? If you'd grown up in Japan and we took you one day and even if like being white or whatever race you are right now, we transplanted you into like the Middle East somewhere, you'd probably feel like the architecture there was alien, was foreign, right? Because it would be
look,
to you.
look. I can, for example, right. So you have, for example, Chinese people, right, moving to America. They're surrounded by American culture on TV and so on. You don't have much Hollywood Chinese like representation in Hollywood or something. You have Jackie Chan maybe, but they're coming there and they're surrounded by it. Yet they decide to build Chinatown. Yet they decide still mainly to have their food right eaten and so on.
Wait, but
So
why do you think that is?
I don't think that this is if you're surrounded because you can't. Maybe there's a chance if you haven't got the chance as a Chinese person now to look at your roots, where you're coming from, and so on. If you're totally, if that history and the possibility of you having the method of looking at something up on the internet. This is my group. Okay, what is my group doing, and so on. Maybe then they will build the same societies as we do. But you can't erase that. You can't erase that
We do
internet.
erase that. Okay, so for example, so if you were to go to like Los Angeles, for example, you're going to see a lot of buildings built like they do, like they build things in Mexico, right? And the same thing if you go to like Chinatown, or I mentioned Hacienda Heights earlier. If you go to certain places in Hacienda Heights or Arcadia in California, you're going to find very like Asian aesthetic looking buildings, right? But this is probably because when the first like wave of migrants or immigrants from these countries came over, yeah, when they were building things, when they bought property and they were building buildings, yeah, they of course made it to look like the shit that they were used to. Because they're typically adults when they came over here. So they had a whole lifetime of experiences with a certain style of building, certain style of food, certain style of media. So when they built these things, it looked like the things that they'd come from. Right. But then their children are raised in this environment, and yeah, they're going to get some of their parents like cultural traditions, some of the architecture, some of the influences from the media, but they're also exposed to everything else growing up, right? And this is why, as Aiko said, hey, as these generations continue to be born and have more children, they become less and less tied to the original nation, the original like culture that their parents came from, because they're just very they're very far from it now. Right now, you have like multiple generations of people that have grown up surrounded by American culture. I mean, I'm like a third generation immigrant from Mexico. And my great grandparents were from Mexico, and I don't even speak Spanish. I don't give a fuck about Mexico. Right. So like, I think like this idea that like
I
people
would.
are gonna be like,
Oh, we
gonna be
got some
drawn to
more.
they're gonna be drawn to their like roots and like feel like this deep need to go back to the place of where their people are from is really strange. It's just I just don't think it works like that.
And before
I
you
give you
continue,
that.
and before
America
you
is the
continue,
best country.
and before you continue,
Yeah.
just business. Guys, we're level 1 hype train, 57% down, 43% left. 3 minutes on the clock. Can we get to level 2 hype train? But the channel, subs to channel, give bits or give subs. Support this community, support these types of random. What did I tell you? Open panels, random conversation. When you have user generated content like we do here, we have these moments. So if you like these things, if you want to see more of these things, help us out. Thank you, Waterkai, for giving 100 bits. 50% now, 40% left. 2.5 minutes to the clock. Can we make it to level 2 hype train? Substitute channel, give bits, give substitute Amazon Prime, says Prime Gaming on the channel. All right. So yeah, you can continue on Arrow. I'm gonna jump in at some point because holy shit, this has been crazy.
Well, can I add on really quickly? Because something that is also really important about that, I forget what that thing is called, ICO. Think about like by the third generation, typically they're fully assimilated. There's a specific like study or like metric that they use for that. But they found that the second generation is actually the generation that feels the most torn or the most pulled to their roots, quote unquote, because they are kind of born between two worlds, right? They have their parents that sometimes are still holding on to what they were born with or what they'd grown up with because it's what they know, right? If I were to transplant you and stick you in North Korea, right, it'd be very difficult for you to just fully assimilate, right, and become North Korean and to like adopt their culture because you've grown up for 20, 30 years with whatever culture you have now. So yeah, their parents are going to have a lot of trouble letting that go sometimes, right? So yeah, when the children are born, they now are in a new society that has a totally different culture that's being spoon-fed to them 24/7. But at home, they got their parents' generation spoon-feeding them the other culture. So they feel torn between two worlds, and sometimes these people even in specifically uh like Muslim migrants, these are the ones that they consider to be like a risk group. And they consider these people to be dangerous because some of these people, the response is to like just go full force into the old culture and back to their roots and want to adopt all the old traditions, right? To like even like an extreme. But most people don't do that, right? Most people just get through it. Maybe they feel stuck between two worlds, but then eventually they have kids. And because their children are now being raised by somebody who didn't have the deep ties to the old country, they have even weaker ties to the old country. And this just gets weaker and weaker over time until they're fully assimilated into the new nation.
Well, I would agree with you that this probably was true. America was very good at that, at integrating and basically deracinating all kinds of culture and people, because it was the easy way, right? It was also you can economically flourish, and you have this consumer culture, which is very easy to get culture. It's a surface level like consumer culture. That's what it is, and it's easy, and people are tending to do the easy things. But I see recently, even in America, I see a revival, and in Europe, it is completely different. You have the third generation being more hardcore to their Muslim faith, for example, here in Europe, than the first guest workers here in Germany. But in America, you had that for a long time. But now I see an identitarian revival. I see that with intersectionalism, especially a revival of black culture, black identity, and so on. I see that with Mexicans getting more and more blatant of what their group wants, and so on. It's mostly based on like ethnic power than when it comes to like cultural customs and so on. But I also see the demand of safe spaces and everything like this. So there is a revival. I think that is also because I see liberalism basically on the decline. I see liberalism has failed, really. This is what I'm seeing, and that is probably an indicator for that, because why you're seeing these revival of ethnic identities everywhere.
You would say
Yeah,
that
Because there's also this sense, and the sense is correct. The sense is this assimilation, even when it comes to liberalism, is basically cultural genocide. That's what it is.
there was
Isn't culture like whatever it takes on the form of? You can't really genocide a culture because culture is malleable. It changes with the people who embody it.
well, it is possible to quash a culture, and sometimes it happens. And it's very.
Sometimes
It would have
should
to be
happen.
like institutionalized, like how Americans did with the Native Americans, which was without consent. But if people are consenting
But
to
also
this
banned.
change of culture, then
But this experience of the revival of sort of like differences, like I understand that there's some of that going on in Europe, especially in France, and I think it has to do with the history of with France and Algeria and all that kind of stuff. But the experience in America is very different. I also happen to live so that area that I was talking about that was heavily Hispanic. It also had the largest mosque in Texas, and I believe it might be the largest mosque in the Southwest. And so I had a ton of Muslim students as well. And as it happens, almost to the person, they were incredibly progressive. They weren't just liberal, like they were way out there to the left progressive, and which you wouldn't expect based on popular conceptions of what Islam is like. But the way that they've been integrating into the United States, at least from my own personal anecdotal experience, they remain in their culture. They go to the mosque. They retain their religion. The girls at the school were wearing their hijabs, but they were were also voting for Bernie Sanders, and they were absolutely not. They were keeping the parts of their tradition. And
Muslim Marxists.
I recognize this as a sort of unorthodox Catholic. These are Muslims who are taking the best parts of their tradition and mixing them with the opportunities that have been presented to themselves in this country, and they absolutely are not sort of a Trojan horse to come in and turn the United
Muslims
States into
definitely
big.
have that strategy. It's even when you look at the Muslim Brotherhood, they have exactly pointed out that strategy.
But these
They
are
have it in
not.
their paper that this is the strategy. I think the Muslim population in America is less than 3%, right? So
Well,
when
yeah,
there
I
are
think it's
small
closer to
minorities,
1%.
in Muslim with Muslims, you have it everywhere. You have it in Lebanon. They were coming as refugees, and they were saying, "Well, we would just want to be friends. We want." And then they had a bloody civil war. With Muslims, this is a strategy since hundreds of years. Since the beginning of the Prophet Muhammad, this is the strategy. Playing friendly, making peace contracts, and so on. When you're weak, when you don't have the numbers, and then when you have the numbers, you try to implement Sharia law. That's what it is. Didn't you just had in America like this?
Do you think
attempt on
American
Salman
Muslims
Rushdie?
would be in favor of Sharia law? Do you genuinely believe that?
I think
American
that
like
will
westernized Muslims that don't wear the fucking hijab, or a lot of them don't pray 5 times a day. They don't go to the mosque all the time. They're just like fucking Sunday Christians, if that. Like, you really think they'd be in favor of Sharia law?
That's precisely
yes,
how
yes, I
my
think
students
so.
who are in the culture behave, actually.
All right, yeah,
And they're
hold on.
also
No,
intermarrying.
but I need to get the
Okay.
answer from him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Arrow.
So what you, for example, you have a lot of Muslims who look totally like European, like the woman, right? They are not having this headscarf on or the burqa or whatever. But when you have, for example, if you speak out against Islam and the problematic things in Islam, like Sharia law, they will defend it. They will defend it, even though they are not wearing the headscarves.
That's just bullshit.
At the
I don't know.
moment.
So you think
That-
if you went to like a
I can
if you
show
went to
you
like an
thousands of
American like
demonstrations.
westernized Muslim, right, and said, hey, the Sharia law says that gay people should be thrown off roofs or whatever the fuck, and I think that's bad. You think they would tell you that that's actually a good thing and that should be happening? No, most of them
No,
are pro
out in
LGBT
the
rights.
open. Not
Oh,
out in the
secretly they
open.
think this.
Oh, secretly, yeah.
Of
Okay.
course.
Do you have
Look,
any evidence
you
of this at
just
all?
I just saw a picture of Times Square, I think it was, where you had hundreds of Muslims basically occupying that space, and it was the most ridiculous thing I ever saw. You had basically the skyline of New York, right? All this modern technology and everything like this, and then you had all these Muslims there dressed as like centuries ago, occupying that space there and praying. It was a demonstration.
I
of
remember
might.
when that
It's not a
happened.
call
and
for Sharia law. That's just like them practicing their religion in
That
the
was
open while
just
wearing.
the opposite. What was happening was they were being discriminated against. They were being prevented from praying in their mosques because people objected to a mosque being too close to 9/11 because they thought it was a terrible symbol. And so as a protest to not being able to pray in their mosque, they just prayed in the streets. And they did it in the largest numbers they could because to show people that they weren't going to be stopped from practicing their faith. That's what that was. It wasn't about Sharia law. It wasn't a protest against homosexuals in the United States. It wasn't any of that. It was about the right to practice their faith in a country with a constitution that is supposed to guarantee their right to practice their faith.
And you said hundreds of Muslims did this, right? So even if this were some show of like Sharia law support, there are about 1 million Muslims in New York, right? So if hundreds did this is nothing, right? So, but I agree with Aiko. It seems more like they were asserting their rights as American citizens as part of this country, like anybody else, right? Which is about the most American thing you can do.
But see, this is the problem. Then you have to completely change Islam. This is not you don't have this kind of Islam anywhere in the world.
It exists in the United States. It exists in Europe.
Christianity has been altered over like thousands of years. You think we're still going around, wearing one type of fabric and not being gay or whatever. Like
No,
like
because we had
religions
an actual
adapt.
reformation. We had and always it is in Christianity is very easy. Thanks God. I'm not a Christian, by the way. You have with the beginning of Jesus Christ, you have the separation of state and basically.
Well, no.
It wasn't.
It did
It
not
wasn't
start
even
there.
the
It
church.
absolutely.
Yes.
No, it wasn't even
Jesus
conceived until the
started
time of Dante,
saying,
and then you had the American Revolution, and secularism started taking off there. And Christianity got much better when it wasn't running the show. When it got kicked out of government, then it worked better. So the reason you see people, within the Islamic faith acting the way they do, these are Muslims that live under Islamofascism, and that's going to be fundamentally different type of behavior than
why is
Muslims
it
who live in the free world.
always
So if
fascism?
Muslims who live in the United States or live in other free parts of the world, they don't behave the way they
Is
do.
totalitarianism always fascism?
This
I hear that all the time, right? If the
This is
left
about-
is violent, it's fascism. They're not actually left wing. They're fascists secretly
Yeah,
or something.
right, because
So-
because of the way they're running the government in ways that are anti-democratic. They don't have secularism in the Islamic in these countries that are run by Islam. They exist in the way the West existed back when Christians ran governments. And what they need is secularism, just like what we have in the West. And Muslims who live in secularism behave well, and they participate in society just like everybody else. It's only when government is co-opted by religion, doesn't matter what that religion is, if it's co-opted by religion, that's when you get that kind of domineering anti-democratic. So yes, it's true that there are a lot of countries in the world that don't have secularism, that are run by Islamic governments, and that needs to change. We just happened to discover it in the West first.
Why does
But
it
we had
have to
300
change?
years of religious wars before we discovered it. We paid a dear price for not having secularism in the West, and now we're lucky enough to have it. They don't have it yet in some of those fundamentalist Islamic countries, and that's the problem. It's a governmental problem, not one of faith.
Yeah, people
Yeah,
forget
and
that
most
when
of the
Christians
countries,
weren't
yeah.
killing like non-Christians or pagans, they were killing each other. They were killing other Christians who slightly believed with the doctrine that they believe.
And there's
Yes,
never talk
I'm not
about Christian
denying
on
that
Christian violence.
Christianity
Yeah.
under the church
Yeah.
had a bloody past, and that it was a problem. But what I'm saying is that within the faith, as far as I have understood the Bible, is from the beginning you have the separation of state and faith. Jesus wasn't even talking about the church or something. He was saying, "Give the Caesars what the Caesars is." His basically his empire is not of this world. In Islam, it's the exact opposite. Muhammad was a worthy leader. He has implemented his state and so on. He was a statesman. He made the laws. He was the leader and so on. So you have a completely different kind of thing. And what was even to destroy the church basically and separate church from state, we have suffered greatly from that. It was bloody as hell, right? The 30-year war here in Germany. But Islam hasn't made that. So why implement, and hasn't made that for 1,400 years? Why take the risk that they didn't have that and risking that this kind of reformation that we have to suffer once again to get Islam to finally be a spiritual
so multiple things. One, this thing about give unto Caesar what is Caesar and give unto God what is God, or whatever, however that goes, right, is a fucking fig leaf to hide behind. Christians have been integrating themselves into governments for as long as Christians have been around. They were all too happy to integrate themselves into
Since Constantine,
Roman.
at least.
Yeah, exactly. You beat me to it, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing it the entire time. And I'm not picking on Christians this time. It's just that a thing that religions do in general. So like there's this separation is only enforced when it comes from the secular side, not the religious side. Putting that out there. All right. And like, so.
I'm just saying that it is easier for Christians to have this kind of secular society than it is with Islam. And the best example is Afghanistan. Right? When you compare that with Germany, you destroyed Germany, right?
Why
you
do you keep
basically
bringing up
had a
Germany? Aren't you
re-education
a Nazi
because I'm German,
He's
right?
not. He
sympathizer?
You
said
had a
he's not Nazi.
re-education camp schools, right? Re-educating the Germans. They have basically have now a democratic liberal society, but it has worked on the Germans, but it hasn't worked in Afghanistan, and we should learn from that experience and not continue the same mistakes. And I think it is a kind of Western supremacy to demand that other countries have to change according to our kind of behaviors and thinking.
Listen,
Because
secularism has.
if this fails, it is once again blamed on us, right?
It's not.
These people that came to our countries and they blame us for destroying their country. They come with this mindset: here are the enemies. Now I get my revenge.
Well, no,
Listen,
hold on.
they've had secularism. Okay, go ahead.
No,
You're
Aiko,
responding
no,
to what
Aiko,
he
you go first. You go first, and I'm going to
Okay.
go right after you.
All right, so listen, there's two misconceptions here. One is that secularism came natural to Christianity. It's not. From the time of Constantine to about the 18th century, there were plenty of things that got cited in the Bible that supported the church running everything, and the Catholic Church absolutely believed in the two swords that the Pope wielded, which was the sword of the spiritualism and the church militant, which was the church that running the state. And there has also been a secularist tradition in Islam. If you look at the Moors as they had conquered Spain, the way that they treated Christians were as people of the book, and they they treated them separately and didn't hold them to Islamic virtues. That was a kind of secularism and a separation of the way that you treated different religions, and that was that anticipates the kind of secularism that we have today. Out in the East, you had more sort of fundamentalist Islam, and that ultimately won out. And if you read who was de Tocqueville, who's very famous for coming to the United States and talking to us, also wrote a lot of letters about Algeria. And what de Tocqueville said was that as a result of setting up French schools in Algeria, we destroyed the modern sort of educational systems, the madrasas in there. And what he said was that eventually France would get kicked out because it wouldn't be sustainable to stay there. And then they'll have lost both the French schooling and the schooling that came before that in the madrasas. And the result, he said, would be a return of barbarism into the people. And this didn't just happen in Algeria. It happened everywhere in the Muslim world except for Iran. It was the only country that wasn't colonized by the West. And they all sort of collapsed into this barbarism as a result of having their own educational system stripped away from them. But I can tell you that 1,000 years ago there were street lights in Cordoba when the British were living in mud huts. So you cannot say that the West is somehow intrinsically superior, or that secularism can exist within Christianity more naturally than they can Islam. No, like things shift over time, and we just happen to be living in a period where the West has the advantage of secularism, and we got like things like science and progress and all of that. But it could just as easily have happened the other way, and at certain historical periods it did.
You're absolutely right. On that,
Yes.
that's kind of where I was going to go, Aiko. So thank you for beating me to it. But talking about like how the Muslim world was literally the center of learning, the center of academia for
During our Dark
centuries.
Ages.
Exactly. Yeah, during the Dark Ages of Europe, that's where you went for learning. That's where the great scholars were. That's where the advances in science and mathematics. Hell, like the math system that we use now is Arabic.
Algebra.
Algebra.
It was coming from the Persians. It was coming from the Jews that were living there. It was coming from them taking over the Byzantine Empire in Turkey and so on. So they have stolen that knowledge, right? That is what they have done.
Stolen knowledge?
Yes.
Well, hold on. He's not entirely wrong. Actually, a lot of that did come from them, from forced converts, or through like
Exactly.
conquest, or from libraries that full of books that they taken to their cities, right? Through their conquest.
A lot of the Greek culture that was lost to us survived in Islam. It was all a trading of knowledge.
Yeah,
sure.
hold on.
Yeah.
But I don't. But this idea that it was necessarily stolen, where these, it's weird. Like I'm fine with saying it's stolen if we say that. Well, I guess all these cultures.
Well, the other
have
bit,
been
all the rest of it
stealing-
is stolen too. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
all the rest
It's
of it is
also
fucking stolen too.
The
So let's
West
not
stole their knowledge from the
imply
Egyptians and from
exactly. So then let's not imply some sort of nefariousness for our Persian or Arabic brothers and sisters. Okay, all right. So we'll start there.
Well, hold on, but the thing that I dislike, just really quickly, I'm sorry, is like when you tie there's like this thing with like the Islamic golden age, I think they call it. I
Yeah.
think the truth is that this golden age happened not because of Islam, but in spite of it, right? Because so it's these
Yes.
scholars working within the system, right? Where geniuses, but they didn't excel because Islam, pushed them to excel, right? They were doing this in spite of the system they're in.
Okay,
In
I
a
know,
lot of
no,
ways.
I'm with you. I'm with you, GP, on this. Yeah, because religion is terrible. It's awful. It holds us back from
Yeah.
higher learning. Absolutely, yeah. We in the Christian West, right? Like we got out of dark ages in spite of religion, not because of it. It didn't drive us out there. We had to rise above it. We had to like we had learning was like held back even within the church by like let's repeat like the words of the good book in Latin, right? Not the common tongue that other people understood. Like
Right.
when you changed that, when you started democratizing knowledge, when you had the printing press, and you started getting it out of these silos, right? Like religion was a silo of some knowledge because the church had the means to pay for it. That doesn't mean that we're actually sharing it, right? Once we started democratizing knowledge, that was a huge help in the West. That's something that made secularism a possibility in the fucking first place. So there's all these things that it isn't Christianity being something separate and special, and it isn't some Islamic being especially terrible either. It simply is religion, as our friend Aiko was trying to point out previously. And I gotta say that our friend Seder over there, hi Seder, yeah, I think she hit the nail on the head perfectly at the very start. When you're talking about these groups who are secretly plotting, right? Like, oh, the Muslims come over here and they think, America is the enemy of their people and they're waiting to get their chance to attack, right? Like, this is the Jewish question under a different name. She hit it right from the very beginning. This is exactly what it is. These groups,
What the Jewish question under a different name is CRT. That's the European question. When you
Please
think
describe
about it.
critical race theory for me. Please, on your understanding
No.
of critical race theory.
Let's not go down that. That's going to
Hold
be
on,
a
can I just
massive
add?
mess.
Can I just
rabbit
add?
hole.
When you're talking about when Dubious says that this is not necessarily because of Islam, but in spite of it. Yeah, that's true. I think secularism tries to sort of dodge the worst elements of all religions, and there's no exception there. But the Golden Age, I would argue, was a result of Muhammad's conquest, like throughout North Africa all the way to Spain. Just as you could say that Christianity spread the way that it did because of Alexander's conquest, when he tears through the Levant and through Persia and almost all the way to India. These are both presaged of their own sort of golden age because there's a ton of information that got shared because of that sort of ripping of the silos, like through this violent warfare through many cultures. And I would argue that Muhammad and Alexander both did something similar, except we tend to laud Alexander for it and villainize Muhammad for it in the West.
Yeah, I'd
but
agree with
they,
that, actually.
Yeah, they did the same
Yeah,
thing.
I think you could also like compare to like what Rome did in civilizing basically most of Europe.
Yes,
Right.
right.
A lot of people they talk about the European culture and European civilization. These people were pretty fucking savage before the Romans got there, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it sounds demeaning to say savage, but some places they were eating it, they were drinking it like skulls and shit. Like they're pretty fucking savage.
Yeah.
So
Pax Romana is real.
Yeah. Or even like Genghis Khan, right? And what he did when he conquered all this territory, yeah, he brought together a lot of people who otherwise would have been in separate little tribes or city states, and they combined their technologies. So yeah, there is something to say for that for sure.
I want to give Zonia a chance. She hasn't said anything. And then, Errol, don't worry, you will get a chance to respond to anything else as well. But Zonia, please.
We all get to stare into the void.
I was thinking, well, hello, Erisorian. I was thinking about sort of moving in a different direction. I'm not sure if you asked this before, but because I jumped on late. But I wanted to move it in a different direction, kind of change the topic a bit to be more. How would so I take it Arasorian's prescription from what I heard earlier is ethno-nationalism. I'm curious to know how one would implement ethno-nationalism.
How to implement it? What exactly do you mean by that? That's a
Or
very
maybe the
broad
way the
question.
Israelis do.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
what's your prescription? If
I would be
ethno-nationalism
totally
is
fine
your
with that.
prescription for solving
But we
these
need a
issues,
religion for that, an ethno-religion for that. So it's not
so
very likely that it will happen this way.
you said earlier you're an ethno-nationalist, so I assume that means your prescription for these issues is ethno-nationalism, correct?
Well, more correctly, ethno-nationalism, yes. Of course, I'm an ethno-nationalist from a German perspective, but I'm more like an ethno-pluralist as well. So I don't have only the German interest in mind. I'm also like a European identitarian
Can you
as well.
define
So how
ethno-pluralist
So
before you
I
before you
think it
continue
is
on? What is that?
necessary not only to have a German identity, but also a sense of European civilization, European brotherhood kind of sense to prevent us having another fucking brother war.
Oh, so that's
That was so
ethno-pluralism to you. Okay,
and
good.
I
Thank
think
you.
these were really the example of why we are in the situation we are in today, because we are still living in the aftermath of World War II.
Okay, Zillion then. I just wanted to know because I didn't know what an ethno-pluralist was. Thank you.
yeah,
Wasn't World
so
War II started
so
by
how do you
ethno-nationalism?
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, one at a time, Sonia.
No, it wasn't.
so how does one implement ethno-nationalism like as a prescription? How would you say that this is sort of the solution to the problem? So how do you use ethno-nationalism? How do you implement it in a way that solves this problem?
What problem?
Well, you
Multiculturalism?
describe
What do you mean? Liberalism?
everything you've been
The
talking
kind of,
about
or
tonight.
what?
You kept multiple times you mentioned, well, when
Yeah.
I jumped on late, but more than once you mentioned that you're an ethno-nationalist and this is why you view things this way and this is why you want to do things a certain way. So you have a prescription. So how do you actualize that prescription?
First of all, it is spreading once again and on an instinctual level, we still having this kind of feeling that we are people. The German people are people. The Swedish people are actually people, and we are not replaceable, right? That is the first thing you have to spread, and then of course other methods, right? That other people are thinking in group thinking, that they are interested in their own in group and so on. And we point out all the difficulties that multicultural society, that it will destroy democracy because it will only be based on in-group biases. It will destroy the concept of what's more important, like this kind of economic policy or whatever, natural environment thing, or really when it comes down to multicultural societies, it is purely based on race and getting ahead, getting your group ahead in the game. Really,
Wait, you
this is
said
the
when it
first thing I
comes down
want
to,
to
it was
spread,
hard
and
to,
then implementing, of course, implementing laws, changing laws. For example, here in Germany would be to stop and reverse the trend of our demographic basically replacement is to send back all the illegals that came from 2015 onwards.
all right,
Change
hold
the
on for a
citizenship.
sec. So this is an interesting one. I mean, you said a lot of things there that I wanted to ask more about, but I think the reverse part is an interesting one. Could you talk a bit about reversing, implementing laws that reverse the demographic change? How would you implement that?
Well, first of all, the things they have done to us, to our people, was illegally. Even under the current laws, it was illegally. So the first step would be get holding the politicians and the executives, like the police, the border patrols, and so on, responsible, accountable of doing their actual job, right? That would be the first one, and most Germans are even up for that. They're still voting for the parties that are saying basically, yeah, we will, 2015 will never happen again. Meanwhile, still hundreds of thousands are coming in. So this is the
So
problem here.
okay, so you said that the demographic change was done illegally, and that you want to implement some kind of laws that holds them to account and forces all these various law enforcement and regulation people, government regulation people, to actually do their jobs. So
Yeah.
somehow, from what you're saying, something broke down somewhere, and potentially hundreds of thousands of government workers and law enforcement people didn't end up doing their jobs.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it just happens. I don't have to explain that.
It sounds a
We
little
can speculate
far-fetched to
of
say it
why
just
they were
happened.
doing it, but it just happened. That's reality.
Well,
I
does
can
it
course you
make
have to
quote you
explain
the
it.
I
Does
can
it?
quote you the laws here in Germany.
Well,
I
I
can
don't really
quote you the
know
laws,
your
or
legal
even the
system well, so it
European
probably
laws.
won't help.
What is it called? The
I,
European laws that you have basically.
well, hold on. Before you go on a
when you come
tangent,
from
hang on. Before you go on a tangent, so can you talk to me a little bit about where a system breaks down so much that probably hundreds of thousands of government workers and law enforcement officers end up not doing their job and literally allowing the law to be broken? Can you talk a little bit about what causes that? Like, explain the situation a little bit so we can understand it?
Well, first of all, it's very easy. It's a top-down decision. Angela Merkel, for example, here in Germany, decided that they should be let in. She said it was at least what she was telling us, that she didn't want to see bad pictures. So it was her fear, that is what many Germans speculate, of her not being re-elected or something, or getting bad press from a very left-wing media. You have to understand one thing: 70% of the media is controlled by state-sponsored, tax-funded media. 7 billion they get every year from German taxpayer money, and the representation in the media is, they had made a study here, it's 70% Green Party and 20% Social Democrats, and the other party was Die Linke, which is
Okay.
a left-wing party.
All right.
And only
So
10%
let me
vote for like CDU. And
Okay,
when
you're
you look at the actual people,
kind of
because they're going through these university, which are
okay. Hold
left-leaning
on,
and
hold
so
on.
on.
You're going a
So
little
you have
far on down the
yeah.
road. So your basis is that it was a top-down thing. It was mandated from the top by Angela Merkel, right? That she basically dictated this. So I'm going to ask you another question. So most countries, most modern governments, have a system of power checks and balances, right? Does Germany not have that? Is Angela Merkel, when she was prime minister, is she effectively a dictator who can command everything?
No, she's not a dictator, but you have also there was this Verfassungsgericht. I don't know. You would call it like with the what was this law in America, like with the abortion law that the judges decided
Roe
to
v.
get
Wade
rid of.
overruling. It wasn't a law.
Yeah,
It
yes,
was a ruling
constitution.
on our constitution, on an
Yeah,
interpretation
and
based on
this
our
institution is
constitution.
basically the same thing that criticized Angela Merkel for that,
Our
but
constitution is
without
very
any
different from that.
consequences. Yeah,
Well,
and it was
no.
1 year later, right? It was 1 year later.
So how does a prime minister of Germany effectively become a dictator and able to control the entirety of the actions of all immigration law enforcement and government personnel with sweeping
Well,
decisions?
the thing is that laws are not basically that laws are getting broken is basically the what I would describe it as the general zeitgeist from the elites, from the media. They want this to happen. They want a multicultural world. They want they have this mindset.
But
Then you
how
have
do you
all the
get hundreds of thousands
NGOs,
of
all
people
the
to not do their
international
jobs?
institutions, the European Union, and so on. They're all on board with this agenda.
So it sounds well. Then it sounds like in that case, that's sort of the standard for your country. They all want that immigration. That's the norm. So it seems like that's what your country wants. If they're willing, as an entire country, to violate all their laws and not do their jobs and let the immigrants in, then that's just what your country wants, then, right?
No, because
But that's
these
basically what you're
Angela
telling us.
Merkel
You
in
literally just said
2012,
it's the general zeitgeist. The
yes,
zeitgeist is your
elite,
is
from the elites. But for example, Angela Merkel is a perfect
no, but you
case.
just said that they
She is
can't
a
be
Christian
dictators.
Democrat. She's a Christian Democrat, and in 2012 she said the project of multiculturalism has failed. It has failed miserable, and she got reelected for that. And what did she do in 2015? The exact opposite. You
Okay,
have to
so
understand one thing. Angela Merkel, back in when Germany was divided, she was the head of the youth movement of the Communist Party. So she's basically an infiltrator. This is my guess why she's doing that.
So then
Because
you
this is
are
not a
saying
Christian
that there is a
Democrat
problem with the
position.
checks and balances in your government that is not checks and balances of power. So which
Of
is it?
course.
Is it that you don't have the checks and balances of power, or is it the general zeitgeist of your population?
It's from the general zeitgeist from the elites,
okay, but
So
if
so
not
that's
from the
only from the
people.
elites, why can't the people just vote for AFD?
yeah.
Like, why don't they get more votes?
Because they are getting demonized. The German people would rather, when you are getting associated with being a Nazi, basically, for voting AFD, as crazy as that sounds, even when no one noticed you're in the voting booths, right? They would still not vote for the AfD. They would rather vote once again for the Christian Democrat Party, who are at least virtue signaling that they are doing something against migration,
Do
but
they
they're
not
doing the
have
opposite.
secrecy of the ballot?
Politics.
People don't know who
Yeah.
you vote for, right? When you go in, like, you can't be shamed for your
Yes.
vote if no one
Yeah.
knows who you're voting for.
Yes,
So
but the mental I don't know how to call it. Like it's a
Mentality.
it's a psychological warfare being fought against us by the media, especially against the AfD.
so you said there's a general zeitgeist from the elites, and then that the elites somehow managed to become dictators of your entire country and have commanded likely hundreds of thousands of government workers and law enforcement officers to violate the law and allow immigrants to illegally enter the country and force demographic change. This is what your statement is?
Yeah, the police have to listen to the politicians, right?
Police have to
So
listen to
if
the
Angela
politicians?
Merkel or
So
someone
you don't
else,
have any
yes,
separation of powers at all then?
no, not really.
Your
So
country,
what you
wait,
have
so
there
your
is you have
country,
judges that
the
can
reformation of
sue
your
politicians.
country's government was supposed to be sort of a shining beacon in the aftermath of World War II. You guys were supposed to be upheld as one of the countries with the better checks and balances, so you couldn't
Well, you
have
have the
someone
same
doing
thing
like
in
what Hitler
America, right?
did.
You have the same thing in
Yeah.
America. No, it's childish. It's a very childish. It's not this classical totalitarian system. It's much more complex
Yeah,
than
we
this
won't
We
today.
have
deny that
checks.
And
America's fucked
it's
right
tough for
now.
me
Well,
to
hold on.
explain it to
We do have checks and balances though. That's why things didn't go farther
if you
than they
want
could have gone.
to get how the system
Well,
works.
can I?
I can
So,
I can
like the whole
point to you.
basis for your
Wait. I have
system.
to
Well,
answer
hold
you,
on.
right?
Well, okay,
I
but
have to answer. If I
gonna
want to explain how the system works, I think the NRX movement, this neo-reactionary movement with the concept of the cathedral, has one of the best point out. Right? It's very tough for me to explain it in
well, that's
English.
fine. You don't have to go into details on it,
But
but
I
let
want
me
to
just
go to
point
America.
something out.
America is also not enforcing border controls. There are also coming thousands upon thousands of people into the country, even though it's illegal.
So
No,
part of the
don't understand our
design
laws.
in the German government specifically, with the reformation of the government after World War II, was to ensure that something couldn't happen like what happened in 1933 Germany when Hitler became the de facto absolute power in the country and dissolved the Weimar Republic. So your country has built into its systems the understanding that it needs checks and balances of power and cannot allow people to become dictators and take absolute control of the country anymore. So,
That is a caricature. Once again, I can't really explain
So,
to you
well, if you can't
how
explain it,
how
but you
this
give this wild conspiracy
it's
theory
everywhere
that
the same.
sounds
It's not
totally
only in
unbelievable,
Germany the thing.
I
then
It's the same thing in
this
the
sounds
UK. It's the
fantastic.
same. You had Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was promising
Yeah, they have an
well,
he
older
does something
government. First of all, you guys have a
like
newer government that
yes,
was
yes,
built
yes.
in
and
He has the highest
response
number of
to.
illegal migration
You have a
sure.
in
newer
the
government
UK.
Okay,
that was
okay,
Do you
built
okay,
in
want to
okay.
tell me
response.
now
Okay,
that UK
okay.
is
I
also
wanna let in some other people, and we're like getting stuck on this, government
I just wanted
information
to
thing.
kind of get him to unravel the conspiracy theory and show the absurdity of it.
I think you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you for that, Sonia. Seriously. Let's go, Doobie. You've been trying to get in.
Well, can I just clarify? Because I think I heard you say, like the cathedral, right? That's something that you typically hear from like Dark Enlightenment, kind of like Nick
yes,
Land,
exactly.
say.
Yeah.
So, do you like subscribe to that kind of stuff?
No, not really.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't like. I'm not like trying to like expose you. I'm
I
just
like
kind
the
of
system analysis of the NRX. Yes.
okay. But to find some like common ground, or at least like to find some truth here. I don't think that what our historian is saying is actually like totally bullshit. There is a push in a lot of European countries for like more migration, for more immigration, because the birth rates aren't very good. Right? They're pretty open about this too. Right? It's not
Oh
like
yeah,
this is like
true.
a hidden
Yeah.
thing, right? So, and when the refugee crisis happened, you did have a lot of fucking refugees coming to these countries very quickly, right? At rates that would make it very difficult for them to assimilate properly, like they would in the United States, for example, with like a more controlled, strict migration. But even here in the United States, we have something like what he's talking about with like sanctuary cities. In the United States, where if you're an illegal immigrant, you come into these sanctuary cities, and you get caught by the police, they're not going to report you to ICE like they're supposed to, right? So there is
Mhm.
something here in the U.S. that we could look at to kind of compare it to, or to understand what he's talking about in his country. And I think that
No, I agree,
if we
but
had
it's
like
just his
waves of like
conspiracy
hundreds
theory
of
about
thousands or millions of migrants coming into the country, from such a culturally distinct place like the Middle East, right, or North Africa, coming to the country as quickly as they did during the refugee crisis, yeah, there would absolutely be cultural clash, and Germany and lots of European countries experience that for sure.
Yeah, and the culture shock is real, and there was a push to try and get more people in from outside the country to address the birth rate issues. But what I'm pushing back on were the two main things. Which one was to get him to describe how he would implement an ethno state, but then he loaded in a bunch of things that sounded made up and fictitious, like that it was dictated from the top down that all these people should break the law and not do their jobs and open the floodgates to allow immigrants in illegally, and that he wants to roll that back. So that's what I wanted to kind of show was in his push for an ethno state prescription. How does he justify this wild conspiracy theory that he's talking about, and how does
Why
he
a
justify the
conspiracy
rolling
theory?
back?
What do you disagree with me on?
I already
First,
pointed that out to you.
we all agree it happens, right? We all know the European migration laws, that if you come from a safe country, you don't have the right to come into
So you're
another
changing
country.
the story then, a
Also
different
linked to
position.
you the Wikipedia article. So we
Okay.
all agree that this is not only German law, it's European law.
Oh, so
okay?
it's legal then. Okay.
So we agree
Good.
on that. So
Yeah, so
now
it's
the
legal.
question becomes
So
how,
hold on. You
how
said
and
earlier that
why
it was
could that
illegal.
happen?
Hold on. You said earlier it was illegal. Now you're saying it's legal. So okay.
No, illegal.
So okay. So explain to me that, because that definitely sounds like a conspiracy theory. You're basically trying to convince us that there is dictatorial power from the top down, that your country doesn't have power checks and balances in place, and doesn't have separation of powers, and that they overrode the laws of your system, of your government, and caused hundreds of thousands of people to not do their jobs
And wouldn't it be easier for people with that kind of power, the elites, to just change the law and make it legal? Like,
Right.
why are they not doing that?
They are also doing that. They are also bit by bit changing these laws.
Okay, so then they're not violating the laws. They're
No,
taking what was
no.
prior.
Once
So-
again,
So you voted them in, and they changed the laws according to what would normally be the will of the voters.
yeah, I tell you, for example, what
Again,
they
to speak
changed
to just
since
really
then-
quickly,
since
I'm
then.
sorry,
They-
just really because I feel like they're being too hard on you, because I think that there is some truth to what you're saying. Like Germany is currently going through something like we had here in the United States with DACA, right? Where if you had
I agree with all
or
that.
amnesty.
I'm pushing
Yeah,
back on the conspiracy theory.
Well, but it doesn't have to be like a grand conspiracy theory. It could be something as simple as what happens here in the United States. You have politicians in certain areas of the country that are in favor of these migrants, even illegal migrants, right, staying in the country, and rather than deport them or report them to the proper authorities, they protect them, just like happens here in the United States. You don't need like a grand conspiracy for that to happen.
So he wants to roll back that, and in order to address the demographic change, which would mean what? Sending out, because he said everyone from 2015
You have to
onward.
change the elites.
So
But
everyone from
just think about
2015
it in
onward,
like
I doubt that everyone from 2015 onward are all illegally immigrated.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them might be, right? But
Sure.
think of this in American context, right? So like a very anti illegal immigration Republican might say, hey, we need to deport all the illegal immigrants, from this point on, right? But and even you might have like Democrats on the other side saying, hey, no, actually, we need to give these people a path to citizenship. Right now, you might have Democrat politicians in power in certain cities or counties or sections of the country that
Mhm.
don't want to deport these people. So rather than report them to the federal government, they protect them, right, from ICE, for example. Or I mean, I don't think ICE even exists
Mhm.
anymore, does it?
No.
I can't
Yes,
remember.
it does.
It
Of
Of
course
course
does.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
But to like immigration, they don't report these
You
people to
mean-
immigration authorities, right? So like it doesn't need to be like this grand conspiracy or like
Yeah,
this
exactly.
like it's not as
Yeah,
outlandish
that
as
that I
we're
would
making it out to
agree
be.
with. But then in that case, what they're doing is those people are enacting the will of those who voted them in theory. Now that may not be the case, but if that isn't the case, then why isn't somebody else getting voted in their place? Why is it continuing ever since 2015? Why is it continuing to be this case, and they're continuing to be voted in? The people who make those kinds of decisions, are they enacting the will of the people? Or is there some kind of lack of check and balance and separation of powers that's allowing top-down authority to dictate how the government is run?
Well, that's what I asked earlier about why don't they just vote for the AFD, because the AFD would put a stop to it, and his answer was that they've been villainized. So
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because you could
No,
just go there
right.
as a
It just
voter and
means
cast
that
your
the-
vote.
It just means
Right.
that the press is sort of performing mind control on the populace in some way.
That's pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
there's simply no.
They should
no
talk to our
will for the
CIA. We're looking for
politicians to
stuff
do
like
Right.
that.
And I don't deny there's a problem.
Right.
Doobie's right about it. The problem in Germany
Yeah,
is
it's a
much more
culture shock.
formidable. It's a bigger problem there than it is here. I mean, they brought
Oh, yeah.
in over 1 million Syrians all at once, like in one fell swoop.
Yeah,
It's going to be
but
very
with
difficult to
all those
assimilate under those
Syrians,
circumstances. Like, I
how
understand
many
that that's a
Polish
problem.
did they
There's a
bring in?
serious culture shock, and nobody's
many-
denying
Yeah.
that.
How many
Yeah.
Polish and other white immigrants did they bring in at the same time as the Syrians?
Yeah.
Well,
Ukrainians, when
They're coming
his
legally,
defense
my
is the
friend.
European identity, so that there should be a European brotherhood. So that would be different.
No, I'm also against this Polish
Of
mass
course.
migration from the EU, which was basically
Oh,
legalized
yeah,
by the
good for
European
you.
the
Union. Of
European
course, I'm-
brotherhood
Yes,
falls
because
apart.
it's also no. I'm not saying that. I have no problem with a certain amount of Poles living here, but
How many
also
Poles?
mass migration from other Europeans, because it's also changing our countries. Yes, it depends. You can integrate much more Polish people compared to like a backward society like Syrians, right?
I
Of
understand what
course
he's
you
saying.
can.
I
That's-
understand what he's trying to say. I see no coherency, though I disagree with your worldview. I see the coherency here. You're saying that with you want Germany to remain a German-dominated place, right? That the
Yes.
people tied to that land should have supremacy there, in supremacy in the lightest way, right?
Yeah, I
but
know what
supremacy.
you mean.
Yeah. And you're also saying you said you're a
Primacy would be good.
primacy,
Good word.
even
Primacy,
better. Yes, thank you. And you're also
Right.
saying when you're pluralism, yes, ethno-pluralism, is that you want for the larger European continent to have some sort of brotherhood in terms of working together and not slaughtering each other. No more great wars on the European continent. So you just want simple cooperation. And then,
Yes.
with this latest piece, you're saying that you are fine with some immigration from Polish people, but if you have too many, right, Polish individuals, it will change the character of Germany into something that is different from what it is now, which you think is a bad
Yes.
thing. And then finally, we were talking about people from other places like the Middle East, right? Coming over, you're saying that we would want less of those individuals as opposed to Poles,
Yeah.
because Poles have because they share these the very loose term of Western values, they're more easily integrated into German society, while these other individuals from like the Middle East may not, and they would more greatly change the character or just have a difficult time integrating. Is that what you're saying?
Perfectly explained. And one more add. I also want this. I also think that this is a concept. It's basically a concept of respect. Really, I grant the same right. For example, if the let's say, for example, the South Africans will be pissed at me, but I simply can't see a future for white people in South Africa. I think that is Africa is an African continent, even though I think white people in South Africa built their country there, and most people living there now have migrated to there. But this is a different. I think this is Africa. Africa is for the Africans, and if the South African black people there decided that they don't want any more white people there, then they have fully the right to say, white people, please go in a peaceful manner, not like these other revolutions, okay? And we can work something out like a remigration plan.
Well,
That works for both.
Zimbabwe did that, and it was a
We
disaster.
happily take the Dutch and the German people back to Germany.
Yeah, Zimbabwe did that, and it was a disaster for them. In fact,
Yeah.
they're trying to get those same white people back, because those were the farmers that had a certain level of expertise, and that who had for centuries while they were there denied that expertise to the black people who lived in that region. And so I think the answer going forward is for people to learn how to live together, not necessarily to eject people who look different from you. And that's true in the white context and black context and everywhere in between.
Oh, the big problem with
there
this
are
approach.
examples of peaceful things. In America, you had this Mexican remake. It was quick, shortly before World War II. Funny enough, by the way, I think it was called Operation Wetback, where no one died.
Really?
Oh my
also
god!
He's not
Oh
wrong.
no!
That is what it was called.
That is what it was called. Yeah.
Yeah.
But holy shit, man! It's one heck of a reference there.
Yeah, but no one died there.
What are you
right?
gonna? So, kind of curiosity. What would you do about the fact that white people aren't fucking?
I think there's many different factors of why that is, right? And we need to target all of the roots for that. I think
Free
it is a
porno
general root,
for all white
basically.
people, for all
Yeah,
Germans.
that of course this also plays into it, but it's minor.
Government paid for
Most of
porno.
all, it's the modern world, right? It's technology, it's liberalism, it's a lack of traditional values.
So how do you
It's the
address that?
contraceptive pill.
can
It's many different things
install-
coming together here.
You can install a black man in all white marital beds, and
There you
that
go.
might be a good way
That-
to assist.
That would inspire some action, probably. Yeah.
What have you done to
Um,
contribute to healing this issue? Have you gone out and fucked a bunch of white bitches?
I won't even grant you an answer for that. I know
so
It's a serious question.
okay. So hold on.
anti-white. I know you're triggered, anti-white. Okay, but you will come to the conclusion
He's
soon
got a
enough
nickname for you.
that I'm correct here. Soon enough, we are standing in front of an economic collapse, and then all this multicultural utopia will fall apart, and it's a group-based like protection once again.
First
One
off,
heck
I'm
of a
Jew-
gamble.
First
I
off,
don't
I'm
doubt that
Jewish, so I
that's-
will end up on top in your world. But I do
You do have the
to
highest
ask.
IQs on average, actually. So
Thank you. I do have to ask because I have to get off soon. What do you like? Your solution seems to be to embrace tribalism and have everyone just like fight for their own little group, and whoever comes out on top comes out on top. And do you think that you like the entirety of I don't know what you would Germany or the entirety of Europe can defeat the like what 1.5 million billion Muslims that exist in the world? Like, do you actually think
Are
that you're
these
going to come on
Muslims?
top in that rat race?
No, I would say it's just normal. The Kurdish people are fighting right now here in Germany for their rights of their own state, okay? So the Europeans, these maniacs, they are supporting not the state for the German people, but they are supporting Tibet, they are supporting Kurdistan, they're supporting Palestine now.
Have you
because
considered the
they're
fact that they don't
economic-
mind being assimilated into other cultures or other cultures assimilating into them? That they don't have
No,
this
I'm-
kind of strong attachment to the white Germany that you seem to hold so strongly? That they don't
What
mind sharing with brown people.
there must be no share of blood, right? The Turkish people are the most nationalist, the biggest nationalist right-wing group here in Germany is actually a Turkish group, funny enough. So the Turkish understand perfectly well that Turkey is for the Turkish people. So when we are saying Germany is for the German people, if they are not hypocrites, they will understand it and they say, yes, you are right. Let's work something out, right? That benefit both of us.
That
Maybe
doesn't
train
explain
us,
the Ottoman
so-
Empire.
provide something back to Turkey, right? And the Turkish people, by the way, had this population exchange with the Greeks and the Turks already. So we even have a president.
I think there's a difference between going into a country and changing it by force versus going into a country. Sorry, I lost my words.
Well, it is done to us by force, right? If I say no, no more migrants into my village,
But
I
you're
will
not the
get
only person in Germany. If the majority of Germans say that they don't mind, then it's not by force.
the majority. There's actually polls.
Do you
polls.
have data to support that, or is it
do you
just
want to-
what you assume?
Okay,
No,
so what
we
I
have
wanna ask,
polls
you're
for that.
willing to tank the GDP of your country because you don't want more people there.
I don't care about GDP really.
This is
I
what
don't
I'm
care
hearing.
about that.
You don't care if your country prospers or fails. You just want
Of
don't want
course I
other
do.
people
Of course I do.
that don't look like you in the country.
well, no,
But
but I
there's
think you would
more
say
important
you just said
things.
there are things that we care about more than GDP, right? Or
Yeah.
things that we care about with GDP. So part of your having a happy, healthy society is that there is social cohesion, culture cohesion, right?
Yeah, and
but
our country is going to shit.
I think
We have politicians that have you have to we have traitors, okay? We are the nuclear power plants, for example, in Germany, were the most advanced in the world. And Angela Merkel, because of some incident in Japan, decided we have to shut down these nuclear power plants. Now we are even more dependent on other countries. Our energy prices are the highest in the world. So, of course, when I would be in power, someone smarter than would be in power, the country would be better off. The migrants that came here, not only the current migrants, also the Turkish guest workers, the next generations, they cost us more as they bring us. Okay, so yes, Germany would be more financially wealthy or something, but I'm also against this materialism. This is part of the problem here.
right.
Your
So
think,
ultimate need,
so I think
those
it's kind of
immigrants-
strange to call Angela Merkel a traitor because she's concerned about like there being a nuclear meltdown in your country. That's a little strange, even if I would disagree with her too. But I think that what you're presenting is actually something that Prime specifically should listen to, because I think you are basically the result of the kind of like multicultural racial separatism that's pushed by people on the left in the United States. Right. And I think that, you look to Europe to understand what is happening in the United States and what the left in the United States is pushing toward. And that's what it is, right? This idea that, hey, we need to preserve cultures. We can't have cultures mixing or assimilating or infusing with each other. People need to stick to their own and stick to their own. That's the kind of shit.
American leftists have a lot in common with German Nazis.
Yeah, unironically.
Sorry, I
I
mean
think this is
ethno-nationalism.
why
But it's
we
not
go back
only
to
that.
the
I'm also like when I'm going into a city, right? I feel like I'm in an what is it called? Like not airplane, the thing before you go into the airplane. Airport, right? I feel like I'm in a fucking airport. There's no cohesion there. It is ugly. Everything goes to shit. I can't recognize the city anymore.
It could just be that your country let in too many people all at once. That doesn't mean that all migrants from all non-Germans or whatever are bad forever. It just means, hey, there was a refugee crisis. Europe had to figure out a way to deal with it, and maybe they dealt with it the wrong way. That's it.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy to understand. They definitely dealt with it in the wrong way. Of course, it was kind of something
I
they
think
had
a lot of these politicians
before.
agree with that now, right? Having a lot of the people that were very pro, like allowing in the migrants or the refugees, they've come out and said, "Hey, we took in too many. We went too far, and now some of these people need to go back home." Like a lot of the countries are doing this.
Yeah,
So
listen,
I wanted to kind of.
One can legitimately say this won't take long. Yeah, one can legitimately say that when you're assimilating other people into your country, like there's a bandwidth that you need to bring them in at a certain rate so that you can assimilate them properly. And I think that if you exceed that bandwidth, it can create some cultural problems. Like I don't have a problem with that. I do think that, like, I don't think the United States. I think the number of people that are coming to the United States is not necessarily overwhelming. I do think the million Syrians that were brought into Germany. I think that might have been. It's debatable. We'll have to see in another 10 years or so how that worked out. But I think that it's at least valid to question how many, hundreds of thousands or millions per year can a country absorb without having to deal with too much upheaval.
I mean, I think so. There was a guy on my server, right, my beautiful Discord server, years ago when the refugee crisis was happening. He was a Greek policeman, right? And he was extremely racist, extremely like anti-migrant or whatever.
It's pretty normal for the server.
Yeah, I mean, his name was like literally 14 words, right? So,
Okay.
but yeah, so I remember I remember the first time I spoke to him, he told me that I was a demon and that like I'm his enemy and shit. But eventually, we got to talking and he explained like the kind of stuff that he was like dealing with like on the ground, right? So he explained that he was dealing with like, a lot of crime, a lot of like robberies, assaults, rapes, etc. And that there were points and I looked this up and it's true, there were points in that year and the year prior, at the height of the refugee crisis, that about 10% of Greece's population, Greece only has a population of 10 million people, about 10% of that was refugees, was migrants from the Middle East and North Africa. Right. So if you have 10% of your country is populated by people who are like from a totally different culture, a lot of them don't have anything because they're fleeing a war. Right. Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of social unrest. You're gonna have a lot of crime happening, and that's gonna lead to people who are Greek who are saying, "Hey, my country's falling apart because all these people are here, and I don't like it."
Yep.
I think that's reasonable.
I think the descriptions generally tend to be aligned. Like we usually agree on, the descriptive issue. The prescription is the issue, and this is what I was kind of pushing back on. It's like the ethno-nationalism doesn't make a lot of sense and isn't actually manageable. It isn't actually feasible. So I kind of wanted to walk him down the path, and then when he got into kind of drumming up conspiracy theorism, I was getting a little like, okay, well, hold on, let's talk about that. But it might be good to kind of walk down the path like what I was saying, where it's like, well, what do you do about these things. Like one example would be white people ain't fucking. So how are you going to solve that problem? Which you didn't have an answer for. It was
And I
just
did have an
more.
answer for. I want to make that clear.
Well, yeah,
But
you did, but he didn't. But then there's the other, like, how
Oh,
do you
I
deal with
told
the
you my
refugees that
answer.
are currently there? You know,
I told you my answer.
no, you gave excuses what you gave, but you didn't have an answer.
No,
So
I told you what needs to change. I can give you another example. I think Hungary, the implementation of sponsoring the families in the way that Hungary does, like for example, like a progressive tax reduction
Another
with
homogenous
each.
society.
This has
yeah, the
shown
boink bonus, as we
some.
call it here.
Yeah. So this would
I
be
just made
another
that
thing,
up.
but I think the biggest problem is really uh, finding our identity once again, right? This is the biggest thing, and that basically we are on the verge of extinction here when it goes like this a few decades more. So to have, and we see that this is possible. You can have a modern country, and you can have a positive birth rate. You can look at Israel. Israel has like a birth rate of three children, I think, 3.2 or something. So it is possible if you have a strong identity, strong sense of yourself, then it is possible, even in the modern world, right?
So
Yay, homogenous societies.
yeah, so basically a utopia that you're probably never going to implement. So how do you actually solve it?
Another thing is, I think it will solve out naturally, genetically, because those people who are basically not having children are basically dying out, and those who have these genetic like tendency, who have many children, they will bit by bit like conquer. When they are not fucking brainwashed in the university and become liberals, okay?
so
I don't know. The U.S. is being taken over by frogs thanks to people like Doobie.
oh,
So
that's absolutely the case. But no, and this is my problem. So when you guys,
Gay frogs.
one of you, maybe it
Hey,
was Doobie,
frogs.
who said that the description makes sense. I'm not sure if it was you, Doobie, but saying the description makes sense. That's my problem. Is that when then he'll say something like, "Well, it's genetic, right?" Those
yeah,
people
then he
have a
goes into his
genetic.
weird,
Exactly, yeah. Going through
yeah,
a
the
genetic
conspiracism.
disposition to
Yeah.
fuck no, that's not at all. It's a thing that happens in a lot of countries where well, there's many pressures, right? As to why birth rates drop. In this country, for instance, it's because there are individuals who become more educated, right? And the more educated you are, the less children you'll have. It's just the way it is. They are pressures in that you have these people who are working all these jobs but can't find childcare, so they're reticent. We don't have government policies that are supporting childbirth. We have just individuals who, especially going through a point of cultural upheaval, we have a rethinking of the relationship between men and women, right? And it's causing people to wait because, like, I'm not sure if I want to get married. Right? I don't know if I want to talk that. Or like, there's all kinds of reasons why these individuals don't do so, and like other individuals do so, but none of it is fucking genetics. That any of these groups have a genetic predisposition to just have more babies. It's we can find obvious economic and societal reasons why to do this, but you
I don't
jump to
know.
genetic.
You ever heard the term "fuck like rabbits"? I mean,
Oh, there you
rabbits
go.
have a genetic
Oh, you got me
predisposition to
there.
fucking yeah.
You
So
beat me. Yeah.
I agree that a lot of it has to do with basically the environment, right? But it's also it has to do also with genetics,
How?
100%.
Explain that. Where's your
yeah,
proof?
explain that.
Well,
Uh, uh,
these are all the special words that I have to go through. But if you want to look it up, you can go.
No,
Please
you're the one.
explain.
Hold on, you're the one making the claim, so you
Search
should
for
probably be the one to
Edward
substantiate
Dutton.
it.
Yeah, because this is like scientific speech. I don't have the word.
So
for it.
it's your faith. So it's your since you don't understand it, it's your faith that it's a
No,
genetics
I am
issue.
English is my second language, and I don't have the
So s-
vocabulary. I don't have
Well,
the
hold on. So why don't so rather
vocabulary.
than getting to like the very specific like scientific terminology,
yeah,
like do you believe that that cultures, for example, are genetic?
Yes.
What's your evidence for that? Like, why would you think that?
Go.
Well, it's the same thing when you have different birds who are very similar. They build different nests, right? Some are more colorful. Even though they are very similar to each other, you see differences. I think most of it is genetics. And why is that? Because the nature, the surrounding, the environment has shaped us, right? It goes with Darwin, basically. And yeah, that is.
Wait,
But
hold
I'm
on.
not
So,
denying
so,
that
so to be clear, are you
environmental.
like, because it sounds like you're saying that like if we took like a Chinese born baby, like a baby born to two Chinese people, right? And we drop this baby into a European family in fucking Belgium or something, right? And they're raised by Europeans the entire lives, speaking the language, eating the food, raised in the culture with all the traditions as if they were just European. You think that this baby would like genetically be like predisposed to build like Chinese style buildings? Like, what do you say?
No. I'm saying there is an environmental factor, and it's an unnatural environment that this Chinese person finds himself in. You can train a dog to do undogly things that are human, like human behaviors. Okay, I'm not denying that you can socially engineer and manipulate people
But like,
to
well, okay, but
behave.
like, what's your evidence for this? Because you're just saying, hey,
Really
yeah,
said dog.
environment upbringing, like, it will affect this, right? So you can train a dog to do undogly things. But what's your evidence that there are dogs out there who've been trained to do undogly things, who will still like genetically be predisposed to do those dogly things? Like what is your like counter evidence for any of what you're saying?
Well, if you let him once again in his nature, he would probably, because he was raised by human, he will probably die, but he will behave more in accordance to his nature than when he is still with his owner, right? I think this is pretty explanatory. You
I
can
don't think it
observe it
is. I don't. So first of all, I don't think it's reasonable to compare humans to like dogs for stuff. So I think that's kind of like a weird analogy in the first place. However, I think we're going to need to go a lot further than saying it's self-explanatory. Than if you're going to make the claim that there's something like genetic about a person's cultural expression, when we can look at different racial groups, right, and see that they express that they have like many different forms of cultural expression, even within a racial group, right,
mhm.
depending on the environment that they're being raised in. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand
There
why.
are
Like,
Also,
what
to be clear,
Yeah.
Like,
all culture is
give-
unnatural.
I'll give an
Culture, by
example.
definition, is not nature.
I'll give you an example here. So I live in a predominantly Desi neighborhood, and there are many different cultures among the Desi people in this neighborhood. They're a mix of people who are first generation or have just gotten here, or second generation. And the cultures are broad with different original languages that their families had, different religions. We've got Hindu, we've got Sikh, we've got Muslim, we've got Buddhist, and many different celebrations, different interests. And guess what? The kids, particularly the second generation kids, are very American and
Okay.
aren't even
Let me
really
give you
interested in
a
selling
very
their
good example,
aren't
right?
even
You have
interested in
you have
celebrating
twin
the culture
studies,
of their
right?
parents.
You have twin studies, and when you look at these twin studies, what you will find out that the twins. I'm not talking about what is it heterozygous. So I'm talking about the very similar twins, right? And
Identical
what you will find out
twins.
when you separate them is that they will. There's a huge correlation between their genetics, because they are so similar, and what jobs they choose, even though they are living in different like parenthoods, a different middle class or upper class, doesn't really matter. They have the same for food and so on. So this is huge indicator that a lot of it is genetics. Right?
Correlation is not causation, but I'd have to see these studies you're talking about. I've never heard of this before.
Oh,
Why is it
but
bad?
like, you go
Why is
Fred.
it bad for humans to not defy nature? Like, we do that all the time. Cars are defying nature. We were made to run, and boats were defying nature because we were made to swim. So why does defying nature have a negative moral weight to you?
Well, the human spirit. I'm not saying that this is anti-natural. The thing is, of course, we can control nature and the natural laws to a certain degree. However, if you go wrong, if you go against the natural law, it will have consequences later. Okay, if you have it too comfortable, you will physically, you will over time degenerate. We are already seeing it with the testosterone levels, for example, right? We are becoming weaker. Men are becoming weaker, for example, because we have these societies, right? So everything has consequences. And if you have, for example, a very high technology kind of society where you have many people working in bureaucracy jobs and so on, not working physically anymore, there must be something implemented that you don't degenerate, okay? That people are still getting physically and have to be forced, what not when you don't have this high society. And I'm sorry that I'm so bad at explaining that, right?
Don't worry
There's
about
better
it.
people like Edward Doctor than
No, you're
me.
doing a good job.
I'm a genius or something, okay?
No, you're
But
doing a decent job. We're putting pressure on you. You got the whole room pointed at you, so you know
well, I have one
it
guy
could be a
who
little
is
stressful.
defending me a little bit. Is Doobie, okay?
Well,
Thanks for that.
Doobie is an ethno-nationalist, so that's why.
I don't think so, but
That's
I
true.
think
No,
he's
America's for Americans only. Fuck you guys.
Right.
okay.
So,
So a
But
civic nationalist.
if technology can bridge any gaps that are caused by the execution of technology to begin with, then does it really matter that humans are, I guess, degenerating? Like, I wear glasses, and I could go get laser eye surgery, but I don't need to because I have glasses, and I'll never not have glasses.
Yeah, so I give you one example that I think is a huge problem, and that is basically the idiocracy. Maybe you watched a movie
yeah, good movie.
Idiocracy. Yeah.
type of scenario. We now can, for example, many children survive that in the past wouldn't have survived, right? So now you have people being born with more illnesses within themselves, right? You also will have more stupid people that can be provided because we have all these technologies. So our IQ is shrinking in the West since about 1990s, for example, because it is mainly in the past the smart people had many children because they were also richer and so on, and now everyone can have children. And we have also this liberal system where the smart women, for especially, go to colleges, making careers, and then with 30 or something, they have one or maximum two children. So and then on the lower end, you have people who are unresponsible and having very many children. That is why I was against these pro-abortion. I think we need to have abortion, right?
So
Everyone's
sorry.
drooling.
Yeah,
Who's getting it?
and then if you have a society that is basically shrinks below the IQ of 100, you can't maintain the civilization.
Wow.
So do you believe that IQ is
Abort all the
determined?
poor people.
Do you believe that IQ is determined by your genetics and not by any other factors like education?
Education is there's a general intelligence quotient, right? You have the G factor, and then you have the basically like remembering things and learning specific
Your
tasks
ability,
and so
your
on.
ability
And
to
that
learn.
was
I understand.
basically the Flynn effect. That was basically the Flynn effect. That was this non-G loaded thing, the non-genetic thing, which you could learn. We have maxed that. There's no way you can maximize this kind of learning. And now what we are seeing is that because there's a barrier, we are seeing now IQ is dropping, since the genetic IQ is dropping for about 60 to 70 years.
So what is the
Right.
genetic IQ?
This is what is more related to, for example, one of the best thing you can measure genetic IQ is reaction, how fast you can react to a specific impulse, right? That would be something that is very
What,
easily
like
proven.
reflexes?
And yeah, reflexes.
What
Yes.
does reflexes have to do with intelligence quota?
Well, this has a high correlation with. Let me look it up for you. It's long. Last time I debated IQ was 2 years ago or something. Okay, I'm not. Let me.
I just want to.
I think what he's talking about is like your ability to perceive information, your ability to perceive and translate it. I don't think it has anything to do with
So
like your ability to learn
quick-wittedness.
in the long. Yeah, basically.
Well, no, to be
Not just
super clear
quick-wittedness,
though.
no.
To be
Like
super
your
clear, though,
ability to
you said
react to things. So if you were to receive a new piece of information, how would you digest it? Is it would, I guess, also be part of that.
Yeah,
I just
on
think
the
it's very much
fly.
like, it sounds very much like bro science. That doesn't really sound like anything that you can directly go like, hey, because you don't catch a ball fast, you're bad at physics type of thing. Because there are plenty of people who are really good at sports who may not be best at math, or vice versa. And I would bet that the person who's better at sports probably has much better reaction time than the person who's like book smart. It's like there's people have different types of smarts, and not one isn't just going to directly correlate with the other. They could just be coincidentally good at both things.
And to be super clear, you said something about if your society falls below like an IQ of like or an average IQ of 100, it can't survive or something like that. But I think that what that tells me is that I know you say it's been a couple of years since you actually like looked into IQ or debated somebody about IQ, but the average IQ of 100 is actually revised every few years, right? Because they keep it at an average of 100. Right. So if the overall IQ, quote unquote, of the country started to go down, they would still move what being 100 means down every few years to keep in line with that, to make sure that 100 is still the average. Right. So, but the reality is that over time, the overall IQ, quote unquote, of the United States, at least, has actually been increasing. And you'll find this all over the world. It's actually been increasing. So 100 today is not 100 20 years ago. It's much higher than it was 20 years ago.
I just want to know, when we figure out how dumb the baby is, like, do we just get to kill it then if it's not smart enough?
That's what I'm wondering. Are you like suggesting eugenics?
Because like abortion's pretty cool, but if we get
We've
straight up
been
kill
there.
stupid babies,
What you need
let's
to
go.
understand is we have biopolitics in every decision we are making. When we have migration, it is a form of biopolitics. So this is genetic. You can call it eugenics,
Think you're
dysgenic,
projecting.
whatever. If you look for a partner, you're engaging in eugenics or dysgenic. It depends. Especially when it comes to women, they have this tendency of hypergamy, I think it's called. They are looking for like status and for the man that can provide for their children. It's genetically inclined to them, right? They look for this kind of stuff, right? So every decision you are making is biopolitics. Just because eugenics has a bad taste, and by the way, it's not coming from the Nazis. It was implemented, I think, first in Britain or in America. This kind of thought. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure. The Nazis were definitely inspired by like the U.S. treatment of black people.
We are doing eugenics right now by not having mentally retarded children. There's a lot of abortion going on there.
Doing eugenics at the border of
there's even
Mexico with ICE. They're like taking uteri out of women coming across the border. Like that's just. It's not even like low-key, it's just straight up happening.
So I think you're.
All
So
I'm
when you say
saying
that
is-
women like marry up or whatever, seek out partners that can like provide like a good life for them and their offspring or whatever. Isn't this just what men do too? So typically when people are looking for a partner, they're looking for traits in that partner that are going to be beneficial to either like their future, to like raising children, or whatever they find valuable in a partner. And for men, right, in lots of like Western society, especially, but all over the world, really, the man's value is the financial security he can provide. It's physical, the physical safety he can provide. But for women, right, it's your ability to have offspring, right? So lots of men will tend to go for a younger woman, or prefer younger women
Mhm.
because they're trying to have
Right.
offspring, right? So it's just it's it's still hypergamy. They're still marrying up, quote unquote. It's just they're valuing different things. So if all
Yeah,
you're valuing is like the
it
financial
and it
shit,
makes
right,
sense
then
that they
sure,
are
it's
going younger, right? Because with at least for 30, then it is an
yeah. So yeah, of
exponential
course it makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
that in
But
illnesses
to
of
say hey that women have a
offspring
tendency to be
increase, right?
hypergamous, but ignore that men are doing the exact same thing. They're just valuing a different thing is kind of silly.
Yes, they are valuing different things. Yes,
so
it's
I
mainly
so
mainly about health when it comes to does a woman look fit? Does she look good? Or something like.
the issue I have with your argument is that you are reducing humans down to like animals, but we make a lot of decisions of our life and we live a lot of our life based on our ability to build shit based on our like an ability to do things. So, for example, women now can have children at higher and higher ages because there's lots of treatments and there's IVF. There's a lot of options. So, a lot of us are also changing our perception on who we can marry if we want children because the fact that it's just much easier to have children at older ages now. For example, just through technology.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of things as humans that we
Good thing.
defeat, so that we change our behaviors, and it tends to define how our society changes as well. So when you go into things like our life should be determined by our biology, you're essentially just throwing out the entirety of the fact that as humans, the way we differ from the most basic animal is that we answer things that we are not good at by introducing technologies to fix those problems. By removing that, all you're saying is that you want to move back to our most animal instincts and ignore the fact that we've developed all these technologies in order to answer all these issues we have. And you're kind of just like bringing in like reactionary excuse of I think this problem exists because of X or Y reason. Now, as someone who's from a country that suffers from mass migration, as in like the mass migration is so heavy that it absolutely destroyed the economy. I'm from Lebanon. I understand what you mean by mass migration. Mass migration can fuck up an entire country if you can't take on the load. But to just blame like the influx, like to blame anything that you're seeing wrong in German society with the influx of Turkish people is just a weird excuse that you see like a correlation with like someone's genetic descendants with a consequence of their existence there, when really it was a system that failed to understand how many migrants it could take on, whether it's Syrians or Turkish
Yeah,
people or
I
whoever.
don't blame
It has
the
nothing to do with
migrants
where
first.
they come
Maybe you
from.
misunderstand me there. I don't blame the migrants first. I blame us first. We have a problem. We have a
Don't you think
problem.
that your
Not
country
only
can take on a certain
migrants.
amount of migrants without, it doesn't matter where they're from? Don't you think that they can take on a certain amount, but maybe they just took on a bit too many?
Well, maybe a
No,
great
I
country
think
could.
the whole
True.
idea.
An exceptional country like America.
Why should we do that?
Prove you can.
I think the whole
Yeah,
Swing
idea.
that dick around.
yeah, because you could totally shove that in everybody else's faces. Look at us.
But
Look at
to
what
be
we
clear,
do.
Swing
actually,
that dick. You
I
got
actually
it.
agree with him on that. Right? I don't think these countries like so. If during the refugee crisis, for example, if 1 million refugees showed up at the border of America, I'd say, hey, fuck off, go somewhere else. Right? Like that's too many. Go away. There's no like responsibility that we have to you. So I can understand that sentiment. So yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Except
That's the
a
dubious
legal
take.
except a legal resresponsibility.
Well, the United States didn't have that, and actually Germany, a lot of European countries didn't have that because the rule is they're meant to go to the nearest safe country, and many of them were going through safe countries to reach other countries that had better benefits on offer.
But there's no provision that says that it has to be the nearest. If a
There is a
refugee
provision that
there is.
says when you enter, the first one you enter, it's called the Dublin Agreement. The first one you enter is the one you need to stay in.
Correct. Dublin. That was the.
But that also fucks up countries like Greece and Turkey because, sorry, I guess
Yep.
Greece, sorry, Turkey's not there. But basically Italy, Italy's been taking a lot of the fucking up because essentially what happens is migrants go to Italy. The Italian police captures them. They tase them until they get their fingerprints down. This is like an actual story from a Syrian family that I talked to. The police tase them until they get their fingerprints on. That they don't want to give their fingerprints because they know what the deal is. Where if your fingerprints are captured there, that means they can bring you back. And this family went all the way to Sweden, and Sweden has a bomb-ass refugee program, but they don't take on that many refugees, but it has a great refugee program because they give you a house, they put your kids in school and they find you a job, but they pulled them all back to Italy because it was the first place they entered. But it's kind of bullshit for countries that are near because what ends up happening is countries like Sweden, Norway, the UK don't really take on as much migrants because they're harder to get to through boats or other means straight from those other countries. So basically,
but the
it's
Dublin
lost
Agreement
cause.
is an EU thing. That's not anything that the United States is part of.
The
Yeah,
US is not
like
part
I
of
said,
that.
the United States wouldn't have a responsibility to those people.
Well, no, the United States adheres to the convention, whatever, the refugee convention that happened in the 50s. That's the agreement that we have, which is if somebody crosses the border into the United States, we have to give them a hearing, and if they're proven in the hearing to be fleeing oppression, like what happened with the Jews in World War II, then we have to then give them all the rights of citizenship. And we've entered
Yeah, but the
into
trick there is you keep them from crossing the border with a big beautiful wall, which is why I voted for Trump.
right,
What?
but that pushes more people in.
No, I don't think so.
What?
If they present themselves at a checkpoint, we have to accept them.
Well, they need to
That's-
get through Mexico. But yeah, unfortunately,
Yeah,
Mexico
that's
does
true.
have an issue of allowing illegal migrants through their country to the United States border. Sometimes, unless we make a fuss about it, then they'll stop them.
Right, but if they can present themselves at the checkpoint at the American border, and then we have to give them a hearing. Like that's
Okay.
just it's a treaty
Yeah,
obligation
sure.
and a
Yeah.
statutory obligation as well.
We don't
Absolutely.
give them real ones though. It don't matter.
Oh,
They just churn them out.
yeah. So everyone, we've been on for 8 hours. It's a lot, and
What's
I'm
wrong with us?
We got our
super-
dose of ethno-nationalism for the
I know we
week.
wouldn't get to student loans.
Oh, yeah, definitely was not going to happen.
I told
Yeah,
him.
but in any case, yeah, thank you all for coming through. We will be back tomorrow. We're gonna have that both sides thing with Not So Erudite. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So come through. I think
And
other yeah, you're gonna be there, right? Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So come through. It's gonna be fun. And just before you go, exclamation points. Well, first of all, hit that follow button. That follow button before you leave. Exclamation social and chat. For our social media, we got Twitter, we got Discord. We have all our conversations, including this one right now, in case you want to be a part of it, or any of our offline conversations. Join our Discord, TikTok, and YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe because that's where you'll find all the VODs. Is our YouTube channel. So we'd love you to be a part of that. In case you miss anything, it'll be great. So I will thank you all for.